The chilly April morning of 2020 began with an unusual disturbance on Linden Street. 6 unmarked police cars quietly pulled up in front of a modest 2-story apartment in Lewiston, Idaho. Neighbors peered through curtain gaps as tactical-geared officers fanned out, sealing off the area in a silence so tense it was suffocating. Inside, 42-year-old Nathan Olmstead was brewing his morning coffee, a habit he had maintained for over a decade since leaving Moscow after the haunting disappearance of Emma Carlyle in 2003. A rapid knock thundered at 6:14 a.m. Nathan Olmstead, Idaho State Police. "We have a warrant for your arrest in connection with the disappearance of Emma Carlyle." The officers later recounted that Nathan's hand trembled slightly as he set down his mug, but his face remained terrifyingly calm, as if he had been waiting for this moment since the day Emma vanished. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. In October 2003, the town of Moscow, Idaho, still retained the characteristic tranquility of a small university community, where serious crime rarely made the newspapers and life flowed slowly in mutual trust. That morning, a thick layer of Pelos fog blanketed the pale golden fields. The early autumn chill made every movement seem slower, from the sound of cars on the road to the hurried figures of University of Idaho students crossing the street. On the road leading to Russell Elementary, the line of parents dropping off kids formed its usual orderly queue. Among them, Emma Carlyle's light blue Ford Explorer rolled into the parking lot and stopped in the spot she always chose every morning. Emma stepped out, opened the back door, helped her children out, and walked them to the school gate, blending into the busy yet peaceful morning scene. Another parent remembered seeing Emma return to her car alone, moving more slowly than usual, as if she were deep in thought or disturbed by something unclear. That was the last time anyone saw Emma that day. When school let out, the children waited outside the gate, watching car after car arrive and leave, but the familiar Explorer never appeared. School staff called the family to check, and that's when the worry began to spread. Emma's phone went unanswered. Her voicemail wasn't full, but still received no response. The family tried calling repeatedly, each attempt only tightening the growing unease in a home accustomed to the warmth of 3 young children. By dusk, with Emma still missing, and every attempt at contact futile, the simmering anxiety of the afternoon turned into stark fear. With no other choice, the family called the Moscow Police Department to report that Emma Carlyle had disappeared. The call came into the night desk in the early evening, as the city began sinking into the golden glow of streetlights stretching over roads, still damp with fog. The night duty officer initially thought it might just be another late pickup case like many others, but just a few initial details from the family immediately changed his assessment. Emma never lost contact, had no history of suddenly leaving home, and above all, she was responsible for caring for 3 small children. This combination of factors led the duty officer to flag it high priority and hand the file to the on-duty detective. As the first response team prepared to head to the Carlyle home, the lead detective recognized this was not a routine adult voluntary missing report. A missed pickup at school was always treated as a red flag, because parents forgetting to pick up their kids was extremely rare, practically unheard of, for someone with as stable a routine as Emma. An initial report was immediately opened, noting basic details: Emma's physical description, the vehicle she drove that morning, family information, and last known contacts. The detective also asked the family for the exact time Emma left the house that morning, her daily habits, and any personal conflicts she might be experiencing. The fact that Emma failed to show up to pick up her kids, combined with her phone being unreachable, forced the detective to classify this as a high-risk missing person case, requiring urgent response. As the first patrol unit left the station, the lead detective simultaneously began the first steps of a formal investigation, reviewing the data provided by the family, establishing the exact timeline of Emma's last sighting, checking her possible movements that day, and conducting a preliminary risk assessment related to family, work, or personal relationships. Though small, the Moscow Police Department had clear protocols for missing persons cases: create a file within the first hour, assign tasks across 3 branches, approaching the family and gathering background information, checking the vehicle and movements that day, and searching areas Emma was likely to visit. The lead detective quickly contacted Russell Elementary to confirm the time Emma dropped off the kids and the moment the last parent saw her leave the parking lot. Meanwhile, a second patrol officer was tasked with going straight to the Carlyle home to document the living conditions, check for signs of unusual departure, and verify whether Emma had left any notes or schedules indicating a change of plans. The duty desk simultaneously contacted dispatch to prepare an internal bulletin about Emma's Ford Explorer in case the vehicle appeared on the road or was spotted by another unit in the area. The official missing person file was opened and coded as missing endangered adult, a rare classification used only when an adult disappears under unreasonable circumstances, may be in danger, or has dependent young children. The lead detective clearly noted, no reasonable explanation for Emma's disappearance, unreachable for hours, failed to pick up children, high-risk alert. The Internal Records Department continued adding background details, marital status, history of legal disputes, and recent relationships that could affect Emma's personal life. Based on the family's information, the detective flagged a priority contact list for that night, which included Emma's ex-husband, Nathan Olmstead, the person directly involved in the children's lives and most familiar with Emma's daily routine. A third officer was assigned to contact Nathan that same evening to verify his whereabouts on the day of the incident. Once tasks were assigned, the investigation temporarily split into 3 directions. The first focused on family and personal information. The second, handled by patrol, checked the residence and locations Emma might have visited that day. The third concentrated on verifying the vehicle, surveillance footage, and routes Emma might have taken after leaving the school. Although no clear signs of criminal activity had emerged yet, the atmosphere inside Moscow PD's command room was anything but relaxed. A mother of 3 who left no note, failed to pick up her kids on time, and had been out of contact for hours. All factors experienced investigators knew could not be taken lightly. As the final internal updates came in that night, the investigation officially began the search for traces of Emma Carlyle. As the first patrol unit left the station for Emma Carlyle's home, the clock had already ticked into evening. Cold fog settled over the quiet residential streets where the family lived. Police headlights swept across the front of the house, making every detail stand out sharply. The front door was closed, curtains drawn exactly as usual, no signs of disturbance or anything out of place on the porch. The officer approaching the front door first inspected the frame, locks, and surrounding area for any signs of forced entry or tampering, quickly concluding that all entrances were intact. After a family member let them in, the patrol team entered to assess the living conditions, starting with the living room, where furniture was tidy, nothing broken or rummaged through. The appointment calendar and papers on the table were neatly stacked. A thin blanket was draped over the sofa, and children's toys sat in the corner, painting a picture of normal family life with no disruption. Moving to the kitchen, the officer noted traces of breakfast still present, unwashed dishes, an open cereal box, a half-drunk cup of coffee, everything indicating Emma had left in a hurry to take the kids to school, but showed no signs of preparing for a longer trip or change of plans. The fridge was checked and found fully stocked with food for the week. Nothing suggested Emma had packed to leave on her own. The medicine cabinet, personal drawers, and key box were examined per protocol. Everything was normal, with no indication that critical items like a passport, large bag, winter coat, or hiking gear, things Emma would definitely need if leaving voluntarily, had been taken. In Emma's bedroom, the bed was neatly made, pillows arranged, no suitcase or overnight bag missing, and the closet showed most of her everyday clothes still in place. The detective noted that Emma had not taken clothing or personal items needed for any overnight trip. The children's rooms were quickly checked to confirm Emma hadn't packed anything for them either, further ruling out a sudden voluntary departure. The officer handling the exterior perimeter continued inspecting the backyard garage and side entrances. The garage was empty of vehicles, consistent with Emma driving the Ford Explorer that morning, and showed no signs of hurried movement, no spilled boxes, broken items, or drag marks. The back door showed no tampering. The ground had no unusual muddy footprints or debris. Trash cans around the house were checked and contained only normal household waste, with no evidence of anyone hastily discarding anything unusual. From these observations, investigators concluded there were no signs of break-in or violence inside the home before Emma left that morning. The scene indicated Emma had started her day exactly as usual, getting the kids ready, a quick breakfast, leaving on time for school drop-off. This only made her disappearance more baffling. There were no signs she had packed, no information suggesting she planned to leave town, and nothing in the house indicating a change in personal plans. The patrol team documented every detail in the scene report, noting that the house provided no direct evidence of Emma's departure beyond being left in a state of ordinary daily life. After completing the inspection and gathering necessary data, the officers sent the report back to command, confirming that Emma's residence was not the starting point of the incident and ruling out the possibility that she left voluntarily or with prior preparation. With the home yielding no clear leads, the investigation shifted focus to the last confirmed sighting of Emma and the route she took after leaving Russell Elementary. The morning after the home scene report was finalized, the lead detective and 2 supporting officers headed to Russell Elementary to gather statements from anyone who might have seen Emma in the critical window before she vanished. This was a pivotal location because the school was the last place Emma was known to have been with certainty, and any witness there could provide crucial pieces about her behavior, mood, or direction of travel. Upon arriving at the parking lot, the first officer mapped out the morning vehicle layout based on school staff descriptions. Parents typically parked in rows near the east entrance, exactly where Emma always parked. This matched the family's account from the previous night. The team began by meeting the children's classroom teachers who had been present that morning. The teacher confirmed Emma dropped the kids off on schedule, showed no obvious signs of distress, and said nothing about being late to pick them up or having special plans. One noted detail was that Emma stayed in the classroom only a few minutes, shorter than her usual habit, a small change, but noticeable enough for the teacher to remember. Next, the team spoke with other parents who were present during the same time frame. One woman recalled pulling her child's backpack when she saw Emma walking past, looking slightly hurried, keys in hand. There was no unusual interaction, but she described Emma as seeming focused on something outside, unlike her usual quick morning greetings. Another father said he saw Emma return to the parking lot after dropping off the kids. She opened the car door, paused for a few seconds before getting in, as if hesitating or thinking. He heard no arguments or unusual activity around the car at that moment. The detective noted this as the last direct witness statement of Emma that morning. After the parents, the team spoke with the school security guard who monitored the gate and vehicle traffic. The guard confirmed seeing Emma's light blue Ford Explorer leave the lot heading toward Pelouse River Drive, the familiar route southeast out of town. He also confirmed no vehicle appeared to be following her or stopping unusually near her car as she left. When asked about morning parking lot activity, the guard said traffic was normal that day, with no incidents or unfamiliar vehicles lingering longer than necessary. The detectives paid special attention to the direction Emma took. With the guard's description, they zeroed in on Pelouse River Drive, the road leading to residential areas, forests, and several trailheads Emma occasionally visited. This became critical data for reconstructing her possible route after leaving the school. The team also quickly interviewed other staff working near the entrances, but no one recalled anything out of the ordinary. Everyone agreed, however, that Emma left earlier than usual and showed no signs of being in trouble. This made the disappearance even more puzzling because there were no warning signs. When reviewing the school's security cameras, investigators confirmed that 2003-era equipment had low resolution, capturing only general shapes of people and vehicles, not enough to read plates or identify faces. The only camera that recorded Emma was near the east entrance, catching her walking the kids in and then returning to her car, but it did not capture her actually driving out of the lot due to limited angle. Still, the footage matched witness statements and reinforced the accuracy of the final sighting timeline. Compiling all statements, investigators pinned the last confirmed sighting of Emma to the moments after she dropped off the kids and returned to her car, before driving the Ford Explorer out toward Pelouse River Drive. This became the anchor point for the investigation's timeline. The team immediately marked that time window in the file and added it to the priority route map for searching. They also noted the consistency across parent and guard statements: no shouting, no violent behavior, and Emma left normally. With the school information, investigators completed the critical early portion of Emma's timeline on the day she vanished. The remaining task was to trace the confirmed route to see what might have happened after she left the parking lot. Once the information from Russell Elementary was firmly established, investigators shifted to verifying Nathan Olmstead's morning schedule, the person most directly connected to Emma's life, and the one most likely to know her daily routine in detail. Nathan was contacted that same morning and agreed to meet the detective at his small apartment not far from downtown Moscow. The interview followed standard procedure. Nathan was asked to describe his entire timeline from waking up until the family realized Emma was missing. Nathan said the previous morning had been completely normal. He woke around 6 a.m., made coffee, read the news for a bit, then got ready to leave for work. When pressed for the exact time he left home, Nathan estimated close to 7 o'clock, but couldn't provide a precise figure despite the detective pushing for clarity. This was the first vague point noted. When asked about his morning route, Nathan said he drove straight to his job in Pullman, Washington, about a 15-minute drive from Moscow, and claimed he arrived around 7:30. However, when asked if anyone saw him at work at that time, Nathan said he wasn't sure because people don't really keep track of each other's hours, making his statement harder to verify. The detective then asked whether Nathan had any contact with Emma that day. Nathan said no, explaining that their child-related communication schedule was clear and he had no reason to text or call. He also pointed out that Emma always took the kids to school in the mornings, so nothing unusual about no contact that morning. Though the answer made sense in the context of their family routine, the detective still flagged it because it didn't rule out Nathan knowing more than he was letting on. When asked the last time he saw Emma, Nathan said it was 2 days earlier at the child exchange, and everything went normally. He mentioned no major conflicts, even though investigators knew the couple was in the middle of a custody dispute, a detail that could provide motive if the case turned criminal. Next, the detective asked Nathan for details about the vehicle he used the day Emma disappeared. Nathan said his own car was in the shop, so he had borrowed a red Toyota Tacoma from an acquaintance. When asked where that truck was now, Nathan said he returned it the same day. This detail was immediately flagged because it matched footage investigators had already pulled from an ATM camera, a red Tacoma appearing near the time Emma vanished. When the detective asked whether Nathan had driven through the Pelouse River Drive area, the route Emma took from school that morning, Nathan denied it, saying his route to Pullman didn't go that way. Geographically, that was correct, but the detective noted that Nathan's earlier estimated departure time was inconsistent, and the ATM footage of the red Tacoma couldn't yet rule out Nathan being in central Moscow that same morning. Since there was still no direct evidence, the interview continued focusing on clarifying the gaps in Nathan's timeline. A key question was posed from the moment Nathan left home until he arrived at work. Was there any receipt, camera, stop, or Tobias witness who could confirm his whereabouts during the critical window? Nathan provided none, only repeating that he definitely got to work on time like always. The detective noted this as an unverified time period that could overlap with when Emma left the school. When asked about phone activity, Nathan said he neither received nor made any calls that morning, but the detective still requested call records per procedure. Nathan appeared cooperative but slightly tense, especially when the Tacoma was mentioned. Observing this behavior, the detective marked it for follow-up. By the end of the session, although there were no clear signs yet directly tying Nathan to Emma's disappearance, the team concluded that his statement contained multiple time gaps, several vague points, and the Tacoma detail was enough to keep him on the short list of persons requiring further verification. Everything was added to the file without jumping to conclusions, but with the necessary caution in an unsolved missing person case. Right after completing the interview with Nathan and noting the ambiguities in his statement, the lead investigator immediately shifted to the next step in the verification process, reviewing all available civilian surveillance cameras around Moscow within the time frame when Emma left the school. This task was particularly critical because in 2003, the town did not yet have a synchronized urban camera network. Most footage depended on low-resolution cameras at ATMs, gas stations, and a few convenience stores. Despite the limitations, any tape capturing vehicle movement on the morning Emma disappeared could play a pivotal role in determining her direction of travel or verifying whether any other vehicle appeared near the time she left the school. The investigation team split into 3 groups to collect the recordings. One went to the Jackson Street ATM, a second to the gas station on Pelouse River Drive, and the third swept the convenience stores along the routes Emma typically jogged. The work took longer than expected because in 2003, most cameras still used VHS tapes with no fast-forward capability. Every minute had to be watched manually to locate the relevant time window. The Jackson Street ATM team reported back first. They found usable footage between 7 a.m. and 8 o'clock a.m., the exact window when Emma left the school. In that grainy video, a red Toyota Tacoma appeared in frame, passed the ATM area, and turned toward Pelouse River Drive. The camera was mounted high, low resolution, and plagued by early morning glare, making the license plate and driver unreadable, but the vehicle's shape was clear enough to confirm the make and color. This immediately drew the investigators' attention because of the information Nathan had provided. He was driving a red Tacoma borrowed from Pavel Gunnison. Although the tape could not prove it was the exact same truck Nathan used, the match in model, color, and timing made this detail one that required deeper analysis. The team at the Pelouse River Drive gas station had a harder time. The camera there was older, recorded fewer frames, and had a limited field of view. After reviewing the entire morning's tape, they noted only a few passenger cars passing through, with no clear images of Emma or her green Ford Explorer. However, they confirmed one important fact: no Ford Explorer entered the gas station, meaning Emma most likely did not stop there on her way from the school. This helped narrow the route by eliminating one potential stop. The team checking the Cedar Market convenience store found another noteworthy clip around the same time that Tacoma appeared on the ATM camera. A similarly colored and styled truck was recorded traveling in the opposite lane, heading south through town. That store's camera was also too poor to confirm it was the same vehicle, and the timestamp had a several-minute discrepancy, but the sequence strengthened the possibility that a red Tacoma was indeed moving through the area at the exact time Emma vanished. Investigators noted a key point: if this Tacoma was the one Nathan borrowed, it was not heading toward Pullman as he claimed, but instead moving into the area near downtown Moscow, a direct contradiction of the route he described. However, because of the poor camera quality and lack of a visible plate, the team remained neutral and could not yet draw conclusions. Back near the school, investigators checked the Russell Elementary parking lot camera, but it only covered the area near the school gate and did not record the parking lot entrance Leshig's. This prevented them from pinpointing the exact time or direction Emma's vehicle left via video, forcing reliance on the security guards and parents' statements. Nevertheless, the repeated appearance of a red Tacoma on multiple cameras within the same narrow time window, especially one that matched the vehicle Nathan said he was driving, was a striking detail. The team continued expanding the camera search to businesses along Main Street, the busiest morning thoroughfare. An auto repair shop had a camera pointed at the street, but parked cars blocked the view. A farm supply store's camera recorded by the hour, but not by date. The tapes had already been overwritten. A small diner had recordings only from 8:30 a.m. onward. Too late for the relevant window. Still, the investigators diligently logged every small detail to ensure nothing was missed. Meanwhile, the analyst officer at headquarters tried to map a plausible route based on the cameras they did have. The 3 clips showing the Tacoma at different locations indicated the truck traveled south, then looped eastward, toward residential areas and forest trails. That path did not match the Pullman route Nathan described. Additionally, Emma's Explorer never appeared on any of the area cameras, meaning either she took a route with fewer cameras or her vehicle passed outside the recorded time windows. Both possibilities opened multiple lines of reasoning, but produced no clear conclusion yet. At the end of the day's camera collection, the investigators compiled a report and assessment. The visual evidence was limited, but 3 elements stood out. The repeated appearance of a red Tacoma during the exact window. Emma left school, the complete absence of Emma's Explorer on area cameras, and the mismatch between Nathan's stated route and the Tacoma's observed path on the ATM video. Although nothing yet rose to the level of proving criminal conduct, all the collected data added a critical layer of information to the investigation and provided grounds for further verification of vehicles, routes, and individuals connected to the time Emma went missing. After reviewing the area cameras and noting the repeated sightings of the red Tacoma during the window, Emma left school. Investigators moved to the next phase, mapping the routes Emma might have taken and identifying locations she regularly visited in her daily routine. This stage was crucial for determining where to conduct ground searches, especially since the camera images were not clear enough to pinpoint which direction her Ford Explorer took from the parking lot. First, the team re-interviewed the family to pin down Emma's morning driving habits. According to them, Emma rarely deviated from her usual routes. After dropping off her child, she typically took Palos River Drive and then turned onto one of 3 main paths depending on the day's plans. Home in the northeast part of town, the supermarket near Mountain View Road, or farther out to the Paradise Ridge area if she planned a short hike. The investigators carefully documented this routine map because Emma was a creature of habit and rarely changed direction spontaneously without a specific reason. The family also said Emma preferred quiet roads and avoided the busy central Moscow area, so whenever she had free time, she chose trails like Headwaters Trail, the Paradise Ridge access points, or areas near Moscow Mountain. These locations had no cameras, which made tracing her path harder, but confirmed that hiking in the woods was normal behavior for her, not unusual. Investigators compiled a list of places Emma frequented: 3 main trails, 2 forest edge parking areas, and 1 scenic overlook on the town's outskirts. Each had the potential to be where Emma went after leaving school, especially since there was no evidence she stopped at the gas station or any commercial area. After gathering family input, the team analyzed probable routes from Russell Elementary using logical driving patterns. The easiest exit from the school parking lot heading southeast was Palos River Drive. From there, Emma could turn right to go home, left toward the supermarket, or continue straight toward Paradise Ridge. Since there was no evidence she went to commercial areas or back home, investigators focused on the Paradise Ridge direction as the most likely, given that her Explorer never appeared on any camera. Using paper maps combined with topographic data, the team drew 3 search radius circles, the first 1 mile from the school, the second 3 miles covering Palos River Drive and side roads, and the third extending to the hilly forested area east of town. Each circle was marked with points to check: small parking pull-offs, trail entrances, dirt roads, and places where a car could be temporarily parked. They also re-examined lesser-known pull-offs where hikers commonly park before entering the woods. Among these, the Paradise Ridge trailhead stood out as the most significant because it lay directly along Emma's usual route and was large enough for a vehicle to park without drawing attention. The team created a composite map, merging the school guard's statement, the possible route past the ATM camera, Emma's personal habits, and the locations she liked to visit. The result was the initial search map, a document showing areas to sweep in priority order: Pelouse River Drive, Forest Edge parking areas, the Paradise Ridge entrance, and secondary roads leading to sparsely populated zones. The map also highlighted the routes with the fewest cameras, which aligned with Emma never appearing on any tape beyond the school. Finally, investigators compared the red Tacoma's observed path from the ATM camera with routes Emma might have taken. Although the two vehicles could not yet be directly linked, the overlap in location made the Pelouse River Drive corridor and nearby forest trails the focal point of the narrowing process. Once the map was complete, the team established that the search would begin at the school, extend along Pelouse River Drive, and fan out to trails near Paradise Ridge. These were the areas most likely to yield clues about Emma's direction after leaving the parking lot, and where the ground search would be deployed as soon as personnel were ready. Having narrowed down the probable route Emma took after leaving school enabled the investigation team to identify the first areas to approach, and less than an hour after beginning the search along Pelouse River Drive, a patrol unit reported a major discovery: a light green Ford Explorer, matching Emma's vehicle description, was parked at the small lot leading to the Paradise Ridge trailhead. The lot was limited in capacity, set well off the main road, uncovered, and surrounded by dense trees and damp leaf litter. When investigators arrived, the vehicle matched the family's description perfectly: paint color, license plate, and all identifying marks. The first thing that stood out was the parking position. The SUV was not aligned properly in a space, but angled slightly backward toward the edge, with one rear wheel close to the grass border, an unusual slant for someone familiar with the area. The distance between the vehicle and the parking lot boundary stones was uneven, indicating the driver did not pull in straight. This was noteworthy because, according to the family, Emma always parked neatly whether dropping her child at school or hiking. The driver's door was ajar rather than fully closed, a highly irregular detail that immediately raised the question of why the careful Emma would leave her door unlocked and the vehicle in disarray. There was no broken glass, no dents or collision marks, and no signs of forced entry on the body. The fallen leaves right next to the car showed little disturbance, indicating few people had approached since it was parked. However, the damp soil beneath the leaves retained no clear footprints due to high moisture, making tracking difficult. Investigators noted that the hazard lights were off, the rear hatch was closed, and nothing unusual lay around the vehicle. This ruled out a mechanical issue that caused Emma to stop and check the car. There was no movement inside, and despite the ajar door, no sounds or signs suggested the driver had only recently left. The team checked the immediate surroundings: the edge of the lot, the main trail entrance, and two smaller northern and western paths. All three were quiet, with only light wind in the canopy, no dropped items, no signs of a struggle, and most importantly, no trace of Emma. One officer walked several meters down the main trail, scanning both sides for anything left behind, but found nothing suggesting Emma had walked into the woods. Calls of her name received no response, only distant forest echo, confirming the area was empty. Investigators noted another significant detail: the vehicle was parked in a spot convenient for a quick exit, but not ideal for a normal hike. Emma usually parked deeper inside the lot to avoid blocking others. This raised suspicion that the person who drove the Explorer here might not have been Emma. Although no evidence yet proved that, investigators flagged it as a major anomaly. Additionally, there was no fresh mud around the undercarriage, but the tires carried dried dark mud that did not match the soil color of the Paradise Ridge area, indicating the vehicle had been elsewhere before arriving here. This detail required further analysis because it showed the trailhead was not the first place the SUV was driven that day. From a distance, investigators saw no other vehicles nearby and no indication Emma had been picked up by someone. Officers checked the forest edges near the lot for signs a second vehicle had recently stopped, but the ground, mostly covered with wet leaves, retained no clear tire tracks. Through the ajar driver's door, investigators could see the driver's seat was adjusted farther forward than someone of Emma's build would typically set it, a detail noted but not yet concluded upon. Inside the cabin there were no scattered items, no animal signs, no suspicious objects, and no evidence Emma had left in a hurry. No jacket tossed on the seat, no open purse, no personal items on the floor. Yet this very emptiness made the vehicle's presence here more mysterious because it offered no explanation for why Emma was not nearby. After examining the entire visible area, the team confirmed there were no signs Emma exited the vehicle and walked the trail, no personal belongings around the lot, and no evidence she had been dragged away or suffered an accident. Emma's car had appeared at Paradise Ridge in a manner that matched none of her known habits, and more critically, her complete absence within the initial search radius shifted the missing person scenario from the possibility that Emma simply went for a forest walk to a far more puzzling situation, requiring the team to expand the search scope and consider other possibilities regarding the explorer's journey before it stopped here. Immediately after confirming that the Ford Explorer belonged to Emma and completing the sweep of the surrounding parking area at Paradise Ridge, the investigation team moved to the vehicle crime scene analysis, a critical step to determine whether the SUV had been parked by Emma herself or by someone else, and whether there were signs of movement, cleaning, or external tampering. First, the officer in charge of the scene conducted a visual inspection of the exterior to identify any deviations from the vehicle use habits the family had described. The entire body showed no fresh scratches, no signs of impact with a hard object, and no dents on the front or sides. However, the dust and dirt accumulation on the body was inconsistent. Patches of dark brown dried mud appeared on the lower half of the driver's side and the rear wheels, while the soil at Paradise Ridge is lighter in color with a distinctive reddish gravel tint. This difference led investigators to question whether the vehicle had traveled through a completely different area before being brought to the parking lot. Based on local knowledge of the Moscow terrain, this type of mud did not originate from Paradise Ridge, suggesting the Explorer had been elsewhere in the interval between leaving the school and being parked here. Upon closer examination of the mud on the undercarriage and tires, the scene officer noted that although the mud was no longer wet, it still showed dried drip patterns, indicating the vehicle had passed through a wet area shortly before arriving at Paradise Ridge. This further supported the hypothesis that the vehicle had been moved through multiple locations. Next, the team opened the slightly ajar driver's door to examine the interior. The first thing they noted was the position of the driver's seat. It had been moved significantly forward, far more than would be comfortable for Emma's average height. The family had previously stated that Emma always adjusted the seat farther back because she preferred a relaxed driving position, especially on longer drives. The seat being pulled forward was not only uncomfortable for her usual posture, but deviated enough to be documented in the report. Additionally, the interior rear-view mirror was tilted off-center, not aligned with the sightline of someone Emma's height. These small details, though minor, were potential indicators that the last driver may not have been her. The interior had no unusual odors, no bleach or cleaning agent smells, and no damp spots or streaks, suggesting recent cleaning. However, the center console was unusually clean. The area that typically retains fingerprints or light dust from daily use was almost polished. There were no scratches, stains, or signs of rummaging inside the cabin. The glove compartment still contained Emma's usual items, such as receipts, a box of tissues, and a few children's items. This indicated no aggressive search or ransacking had occurred. Still, the passenger side floor had a few small dark soil particles matching the color of the mud on the rear tires, while the driver's side floor was noticeably cleaner. It was difficult to determine whether this dirt came from the driver's shoes or from the vehicle's movement, but the uneven distribution was flagged for further analysis. Investigators also checked the steering wheel and door handles for clear fingerprints, but due to the humid environment, prints were smeared and could not be identified at the scene. Another point noted was that the rear passenger side door was slightly stiff to open due to dry hinges, while the driver's door opened much more easily. opposite to Emma's habit of primarily using the rear door when transporting children and the driver's door only when driving alone. This drew investigators' attention to the access pattern. The final driver may not have used the rear door the way Emma did. When examining the trunk, the team found no signs of prying or distortion of the weather stripping, and no unusual items inside. Everything appeared overly tidy, inconsistent with someone who had just dropped off children at school and would typically leave at least a few temporary items, such as a jacket, snack container, or children's belongings. On the rear seat, one seatbelt was twisted, a small detail the family said Emma always straightened immediately because she disliked twisted belts. This allowed investigators to infer that whoever drove the vehicle after Emma left the school may not have been familiar with its interior. Finally, investigators confirmed the vehicle displayed no mechanical warning lights or illuminated check engine indicators. This ruled out the possibility that Emma had parked here due to a mechanical failure. Upon completing the vehicle examination, the investigation team identified two major anomalies: mud that did not originate from Paradise Ridge and a driver's seat position completely inconsistent with Emma's habits. These factors, combined with the vehicle's absence from any cameras after leaving the school, elevated the Explorer from merely an abandoned vehicle to a potential crime scene. This provided the basis for expanding analysis to determine the true route of the vehicle and its driver before it was located. Immediately after finishing the Ford Explorer crime scene analysis and documenting the anomalies related to the mud, driver's seat position, and interior condition, the investigation team proceeded to the next phase of the response protocol for a potential high-risk missing person, deploying a ground search in the Paradise Ridge forest. The area is vast and topographically complex, with numerous intersecting trails, constantly changing slopes, and dense vegetation, requiring a precise methodical search to avoid missing anything. The lead investigator decided to employ a grid search pattern, dividing the area into predetermined rectangular sectors to ensure no overlap or gaps in coverage. The search teams were split into small groups of 3 to 4 people each, moving parallel to one another a few meters apart to provide comprehensive visual coverage of the ground, leaf litter, and areas beneath bushes. After establishing the grid map, the first team began at the parking lot where Emma's vehicle was found and moved inward along the largest trail in Paradise Ridge. The initial area they covered was the wide, relatively flat main trail, frequently used by locals for walking or jogging on weekends. The ground there was mostly covered with wet maple leaves, making it difficult to detect footprints or dropped items since the surface did not retain clear impressions. The team swept left to right, using high-powered flashlights to illuminate grass clumps, tree roots, and rock crevices along the trail to ensure no small evidence was missed. There were no indications Emma had walked in this direction, no fresh footprints, no personal items, no unnaturally flattened soil, and no areas that appeared to have been used for resting or stopping. From the main trail, the team branched off onto a narrower path that climbed steeply upward. The terrain changed. The trail narrowed and visibility was obstructed by dense brush on both sides. This section could be hazardous for someone unfamiliar with the woods, yet according to the family, Emma only chose easy low-slope trails and did not venture into difficult-to-access areas. Nevertheless, the team thoroughly searched the entire zone to rule out any possibility. They looked for signs of sliding, disturbed soil or rocks, or freshly broken branches, common indicators of a fall or someone being dragged. However, no soil had been recently disturbed, there were no signs of a struggle, and all leaves showed uniform coloration, indicating they had lain undisturbed for hours or days. Another team checked the lower forest to the south, where a shallow creek ran through. Areas near water are always examined carefully because of the possibility of slipping or dropping items. That team used long sticks to gently stir the leaf litter at the creek bottom in search of submerged objects, but found only decayed leaves and gravel. Along both banks, they saw no fresh footprints, Any impressions were old and indistinct, likely from hikers several days earlier. Continuing to expand the search, teams moved toward the rocky slope where large boulders overlapped and deep crevices created shadowed pockets. This was an area that could conceal critical evidence, but was also the most difficult to search. Teams used specialized lights to illuminate each crevice and root hollow, looking for small items such as keys, a handkerchief, or torn clothing. However, the crevices within close proximity to the parking lot contained nothing unusual. Teams maintained constant radio contact, reporting each completed sector. Overall analysis revealed a clear pattern. The entire area around the parking lot showed no trace of Emma traveling on foot. This made the possibility that Emma voluntarily left her vehicle to walk into the woods less convincing than initially assumed. Additionally, the soil beneath bushes near the lot remained undisturbed, confirming no one had passed through recently. The smell of damp earth and the soft sound of wind only heightened the stillness, giving the impression that Emma's vehicle had been left with no subsequent movement by its driver. The search results were compiled. No sign of Emma on any trail within 300 meters of the parking lot. No dropped personal items, no evidence of a fall, slip, or struggle, and no indication she had entered the woods by natural means. All initial field data led to a provisional but significant conclusion. The presence of the explorer at Paradise Ridge produced no corresponding trail of evidence linked to Emma herself, forcing investigators to seriously consider that the vehicle was brought there by someone else, or that Emma left the vehicle in a manner that left no clear trace. Surveying the vast area just covered, investigators noted that the initial results offered no hope, and Paradise Ridge, despite being where the vehicle was found, provided no clues whatsoever about Emma's whereabouts on the morning she disappeared. Although the sweep of trails and forest areas around the Paradise Ridge parking lot yielded no direct trace of Emma, search teams continued expanding outward in ever-widening circles to avoid missing any small detail that could prove pivotal. Roughly 20 minutes after completing the first grid search circle, an officer from the expanded team radioed that he had spotted what appeared to be a plastic card lying at the edge of a low bush, approximately 40+ meters from the parking lot. When investigators arrived, flashlight beams revealed a dust and moisture-covered card, still legible with the words Moscow Public Library, and part of a name blurred by dried mud. The family had previously stated Emma always carried her library card in her wallet or jacket pocket, making it immediately probable that the item belonged to her. However, the card's location was beside a seldom-used side path, not on any route Emma would typically take if she decided to enter the woods. The investigator carefully marked the location, photographed the scene, and used forceps to secure the evidence in a separate bag without disturbing the surface. Though small, the item raised an immediate question: did the card fall from Emma's hand, or was it brought here by someone else? Natural dropping could not be determined on site. The card showed no unusual scratches, bending, or signs of being yanked or thrown hard. After securing the card, the search team extended several meters south of the trail and began meticulously examining every square meter beneath the canopy. Another officer discovered a thin gray women's glove draped halfway over fallen leaves. The glove was not positioned as if dropped during rapid movement. Rather, it lay relatively neatly, uncovered by anything, and showing no tears or stretching. Although confirmation with the family was needed to verify whether Emma owned that type of glove, it was collected because its proximity to the first item suggested either Emma had passed through the area or someone was deliberately planting items to mislead. Notably, the surrounding area showed no fresh footprints, no broken leaf clusters, and no signs of a heavy object being thrown. The dry leaves remained intact, indicating the glove may have been there since before the previous night's dew. Minutes later, a third item appeared. A black plastic hair clip with one edge slightly chipped at the clasp. The clip lay beneath a thin layer of leaves, likely blown or settled there after several light rains. The family had described Emma as someone who usually secured her hair with clips rather than hair ties, making it highly probable the item was hers. However, investigators noted the clip showed no signs of forceful breakage, and the chipped edge appeared old. All three items were found within a radius of less than 60 meters, but what drew more attention than the objects themselves was their context. No signs of struggle, no torn leaves, no furrowed soil, elements typically present if a scuffle or dragging had occurred. The ground at all three locations was flat and stable, indicating no running or violent impact. This presented two possibilities. Emma dropped the items herself while moving, or they were placed there for an unclear purpose. If Emma had voluntarily left her vehicle and entered the woods, she would normally follow clear trails and would be unlikely to randomly scatter belongings in this manner. Yet if she had been taken into the woods or items thrown from a moving vehicle, the scene would look markedly different. Thus, the sporadic appearance of these items without accompanying signs of forceful movement made the situation even more puzzling. The field team continued searching the narrow area around the third item, using specialized lights to scan close to the ground and root zones in hopes of finding something more directional. One officer gently moved leaves with a probe, but no additional items belonging to Emma or helpful in reconstructing a route were found. Investigators concluded that although more items were discovered than initially expected, they did not form a logical sequence: scattered positions, apparently random drops, and no signs of hurried movement. This weakened the hypothesis that Emma walked into the woods, because if she had taken this direction, there would at least be footprints or disturbance of the leaf litter. All items were collected according to protocol, photographed in place, precisely mapped, sealed in evidence bags, labeled with time, location, and recovering officer, and transported to the lab. Each item was tagged to maintain chain of custody. If any belonged to Emma, it would become a crucial piece in determining the path she or the driver took after the explorer stopped at Paradise Ridge. At that moment, however, the team could not reach a conclusion because the disconnected nature of the evidence did not clearly support any specific scenario. Upon completing collection and marking, investigators noted that the three items were the only signs found in the forest, but were insufficient to confirm Emma had been present there on the morning of her disappearance. Paradise Ridge, despite being where both the vehicle and the items were located, still provided no direct proof that Emma entered the woods on her own 2 feet. After collecting the three scattered items around Paradise Ridge, but obtaining no direct evidence that Emma had walked into the area, investigators returned to a key lead from earlier statements: the red Toyota Tacoma that Nathan Olmstead said he had borrowed on the exact morning Emma disappeared. The repeated appearance of a red Tacoma on 2 area cameras, with timestamps matching when Emma left the school, required further verification, even without direct connecting evidence. The first step was contacting the vehicle's legal owner, Pavel Gunnison, an acquaintance of Nathan's and a resident on the western edge of Moscow. When asked about Nathan borrowing the truck, Pavel briefly confirmed that Nathan had borrowed the Toyota Tacoma the evening before Emma went missing, because his own vehicle was in the shop. Pavel said such borrowing was not unusual since it had happened before, so he thought nothing of it. However, when asked if he remembered exactly when Nathan returned the truck, Pavel said it was returned that same afternoon, but could only say it was still light out, offering no more precise time. Investigators noted this vagueness because it mirrored Nathan's own responses regarding timelines. Next, the team requested to inspect the Tacoma directly. Pavel agreed and led them to the garage where it was parked. Externally, the Tacoma showed no abnormalities, no new dents, no scratches, and the paint had a natural layer of dust, typical for an older truck, regularly driven on rural roads. What caught investigators' attention, however, was the underside, particularly the front and rear tires. Both were unusually clean compared to the dusty body. Pavel explained that he had washed the tires himself the previous day while checking a dirt road, but this explanation did not align with the timeline of Nathan returning the truck. As Pavel admitted he did not wash it the same day, Nathan brought it back. Although there was no conclusive evidence linking this to the disappearance, the detail was recorded for later evaluation. Upon opening the doors to inspect the interior, the team noted the cabin was cleaner than normal given Pavel's described habits. Pavel regularly hauled work tools, so the truck was rarely clean. Yet on the inspection day, the floor was nearly free of debris or dirt, and the front passenger seat was unusually spotless. The driver's seat, by contrast, had a thin natural dust layer, unlike the passenger seat which would normally see more use when Pavel drove alone. This raised the question of whether the passenger seat had been thoroughly wiped before the truck was returned. However, because there were no clear fingerprints or foreign substances, and given the forensic limitations of 2003, the interior yielded no useful evidence at that time. Technicians attempted UV light examination for fluids, blood or fibers, but found nothing noteworthy. Light vacuuming collected floor dust samples, but equipment limitations meant the samples were insufficient for detailed analysis. Investigators also checked floor mats, storage compartments, and under seats, but found no items directly linkable to Emma. One point of interest was that the passenger seat was moved slightly forward compared to Pavel's usual setting, Pavel being taller than both Nathan and Emma. Since Nathan admitted driving the truck, seat adjustment was entirely normal and could not be used as evidence. Investigators asked Pavel specifically whether he noticed anything different about the truck when he got it back. Pavel replied only that it seemed cleaner than usual, but since Nathan had borrowed it for temporary use, he thought nothing more of it. When asked if he noticed any bleach or unusual odors, Pavel said nothing stood out to him. All these observations, while worth documenting, did not constitute concrete evidence. At the end of the inspection, investigators summarized, the Tacoma showed minor discrepancies in cleanliness between driver and passenger areas, unusually clean tires, and an interior tidier than the owner's norm. However, these could all be explained by ordinary activity and could not serve as grounds to conclude the Tacoma was involved in Emma's disappearance. There were no usable fingerprints, no biological traces, no dropped items, and no modern trace DNA technology available. In 2003, these small details provided no breakthrough. The Tacoma, despite appearing on camera and being used by Nathan on the exact morning Emma vanished, could not yet be placed at the center of the investigation due to lack of direct evidence. The case therefore remained in a holding pattern, awaiting broader analysis results and other leads to determine whether the Tacoma actually played any role in Emma's movements or was merely a coincidence on an already ambiguous morning. After examining the Tacoma that Nathan had borrowed, but finding no useful clues at that point in 2003, the investigators shifted focus to solidifying information about individuals who might have known Nathan's schedule on the morning Emma disappeared. Sabrina Mendoza, Nathan's girlfriend at the time, was considered a critical source because she was living with him during this period and could confirm or refute the timeline Nathan had provided. When invited to the Moscow Police Department for questioning, Sabrina arrived cooperative but visibly tense, repeatedly looking down at her hands while waiting for the investigator to prepare the file. During the interview, Sabrina was asked to detail her own timeline on the morning of the disappearance. She stated that she left the house around 7:15 a.m. to go to her job at a grocery store on Main Street, and that Nathan was still home when she left. When asked if she remembered what Nathan was doing at that moment, she said he was making coffee in the kitchen and showed no unusual behavior. Sabrina also maintained that Nathan did not leave before her and that the Tacoma he had borrowed from Pavel was still parked in the driveway when she departed. This was a significant detail because, in Nathan's statement, he claimed to have left the house around 7 a.m. to drive to Pullman, a direct contradiction to Sabrina's claim that he was still home at 7:15. When the investigator asked Sabrina to recount the morning in greater detail before she left for work, she described everything as routine: waking up, having a light breakfast, changing clothes and leaving on time. There were no arguments, no phone calls, and nothing that disrupted the morning in her memory. However, when asked about Nathan's specific movements after she left, Sabrina said she didn't know and didn't pay attention, explaining that they typically did not closely track each other's schedules. This prompted the investigator to verify the information through a neighbor's security camera. A camera across the street, owned by a family that used the system to monitor their children's play area, captured footage of a red Tacoma leaving Nathan's house at approximately 7:05 a.m., earlier than the time Sabrina claimed the truck was still in the driveway at 7:15. Although the footage was not clear enough to identify the driver, the vehicle's body, bed, and roll bar all matched Pavel's Tacoma. This created a direct conflict between Sabrina's statement and the video evidence. When confronted, Sabrina appeared confused and insisted she hadn't checked the clock. The 7:15 time was only an estimate based on her usual work routine. She said she might have left earlier than she thought, and that Nathan could have left before her without her noticing. However, the investigator noted that Sabrina's answers shifted quickly, lacked certainty, and tended to adjust to the information being presented, common indicators of an inaccurate or protective statement. When asked further about Nathan's activities the previous evening, Sabrina said he had seemed normal and only mentioned needing the Tacoma because his own vehicle was in the shop for maintenance. Yet when asked whether Nathan had gone out that night, she admitted he had left for a short while, but couldn't recall the exact time. This detail raised the possibility that Nathan may have been outside during a critical window just before Emma's disappearance. Sabrina's statement continued to show inconsistencies when she said she didn't remember whether the Tacoma was in the driveway in the minutes before she left. When pressed for greater precision, she could only say she thought it was still there because she hadn't heard the engine start. This was deemed unreliable because Nathan's house was in an area with frequent traffic noise, making it difficult to distinguish a single vehicle starting up unless standing near the door. Moreover, the neighbor's camera not only showed the Tacoma leaving at 7:05, but also showed no vehicle in Nathan's driveway around 7:20, completely contradicting Sabrina's claim that she left while the truck was still parked there. Her testimony was therefore flagged as inconsistent and requiring further verification. When questioned more closely about her morning routine that day, for example, whether she had gone into the kitchen while Nathan was making coffee, or where exactly she had seen him in the house, Sabrina continued to give vague responses, saying everything was blurry and that she hadn't paid much attention. Notably, when asked whether Nathan was dressed for work or still in sleepwear when she left, Sabrina admitted she didn't remember clearly. These memory gaps regarding key details led the investigator to question the overall accuracy of her account. Although there was no direct evidence that Sabrina was lying, the contradictions between her statement and the neighbor's video were considered noteworthy. In the report, the investigator noted that Sabrina repeatedly adjusted her account based on information revealed during the interview and that her timeline was inconsistent with the video evidence. However, in 2003, without advanced forensic technology and without sufficient evidence to charge anyone, Sabrina's inconsistent statements were categorized only as contradictions requiring further follow-up, not enough to prove her direct involvement in Emma's disappearance. The case therefore remained fragmented, lacking a clear foothold for the next step. With Sabrina Mendoza's statement recorded as containing multiple inconsistencies, yet still not forming a concrete investigative direction, the investigator was forced to expand the scope beyond Moscow and canvass major roadways that could be linked to the Tacoma's or Emma's Explorer's movements that morning. One of the area's most significant routes was US 95, the highway connecting Moscow to towns south and east, and a familiar thoroughfare for locals. It was here that the case gained another small but noteworthy lead. An Idaho Transportation Department road maintenance worker contacted the Moscow Police Department, stating he believed he had seen a red Toyota Tacoma parked near a drainage culvert along US 95 on the early morning of Emma's disappearance. The worker, Harold Green, regularly performed inspections on the road and said that between approximately 7:30 and 7:45 a.m., while driving past a mile marker south of the city, he saw a red Tacoma stopped on the shoulder with its rear end facing a large drainage culvert. Harold noted it only because the truck was parked at an odd angle and because the driver appeared to be standing on the passenger side for a few minutes before getting back in and driving away. At the time, he thought nothing of it. People sometimes stopped to check cargo in the bed, but news of the disappearance in the local paper jogged his memory, and he felt compelled to report it. The investigator recognized that the time frame Harold provided overlapped with the unaccounted-for period in Nathan's statement, and if the truck was indeed the one Nathan had borrowed, its presence on US 95 would further undermine Nathan's claimed timeline. The team therefore decided to conduct an on-site inspection of the location Harold described. Upon arrival, they found the culvert area sat lower than the roadway, with a wide concrete opening leading into the drainage system running parallel to US 95. The opening was large enough for a person to crouch and lift the grate or maneuver inside, but the surrounding area was thick with weeds and loose dirt, making casual observation difficult. The team began searching the ground near the shoulder for tire tracks or fresh soil disturbance. But since more than a day had passed since the disappearance, any potential tire marks had been obscured by highway traffic. The concrete lip of the culvert showed no fresh scratches or signs of heavy objects being dragged. However, one officer noticed a few dry leaves and clumps of dirt caught in the culvert grate that appeared recently disturbed. Still, strong winds and heavy traffic made it impossible to attribute the disturbance definitively. When examining the area around the culvert entrance, the team detected the typical damp odor of standing water, but found no obvious items in plain view. The culvert tunnel itself was long, dark, and had a shallow stream running through it, creating a thin layer of mud that was hard to date for disturbance. The investigators wanted to search deeper inside, but the Moscow PD's equipment in 2003 was rudimentary. They had no pipe cameras, no inspection drones, and no thermal imaging to detect objects inside. They could only shine high-powered flashlights into the initial section of the tunnel, revealing nothing but flowing water and debris. One officer suggested crawling inside for a manual search, but the lead investigator declined due to the low ceiling, safety risks, and the fact that the culvert was not designed for human entry. The flowing water also made the concrete slippery, increasing the chance of injury. They attempted to probe the first few meters with a long hook, but retrieved only decayed leaves and branches carried by the current. No foreign objects, no plastic bags, torn fabric, or personal items that might suggest evidence related to Emma were found. The investigator noted that while the culvert could have been accessed by someone, there were no clear signs that anything had been discarded there. Mud streaks or displaced leaves could easily be natural. The key factor, however, remained Harold's timing. If the red Tacoma he saw was indeed Nathan's borrowed truck, Nathan could not have been in Pullman when he claimed. This gap continued to widen the ambiguity in both Nathan's and Sabrina's statements, tilting verification efforts toward the possibility that the Tacoma had traveled along US 95. Nevertheless, in 2003, with no physical evidence recovered from the culvert, no equipment for deeper inspection, and no traffic cameras along US 95, Harold's report remained only a valuable reference lead rather than hard evidence. The investigator documented everything, marked the culvert location on the case map, and assessed it as a lead to keep open but not yet sufficient to shape a new investigative direction. US 95, despite being a major route and potentially tied to the Tacoma's movements, yielded no concrete results to explain Emma's disappearance during the initial investigation. After examining the US 95 culvert area without recovering clear physical evidence, and still unable to establish the actual routes of either the Tacoma or Emma's Explorer that morning, the entire investigation began to stall. Leads that had once seemed promising, scattered items in the forest, Sabrina's inconsistent statements, the neighbor's footage of the red Tacoma, and the road worker's sighting, all remained at the level of suggestion, none strong enough to become criminal evidence. The investigators faced the reality that after days of continuous work, they still had no body, no direct proof that Emma had been harmed, and no indication that a crime had even occurred. There was no blood, no signs of a struggle, no victim footwear impressions in the forest, and no witnesses who saw Emma after she left campus. The Explorer, abandoned at Paradise Ridge, showed no signs of violence. Its interior was unusually clean, but not conclusively wiped down. The items recovered from the forest, the library card, glove, and hair clip, contained no biological traces, could not be definitively tied to Emma, and did not form a coherent trail of her movements or actions. In 2003, trace DNA analysis technology was still limited, preventing the team from fully exploiting microscopic characteristics on those small items. Every possibility remained hypothetical. At the same time, Nathan's and Sabrina's statements, despite numerous contradictions and time gaps, had not crossed the threshold required to obtain comprehensive search warrants or arrest warrants. Idaho law demanded more concrete evidence than someone not remembering clearly before coercive measures could be applied. Nathan had the right to remain silent, and Sabrina had the right not to incriminate herself. The neighbor's Tacoma footage was too low quality to read a license plate or identify the driver, so it could not be used to force Nathan to explain his movements further. The US 95 lead, while suspicious, rested solely on one road worker's memory without physical corroboration. The investigators attempted to reconstruct Emma's timeline on the day she vanished, but the more they built it, the larger the gaps became. No one knew which direction Emma took after leaving campus beyond the security guard's statement. No cameras captured the explorer after that moment. No witnesses saw her at any stop in town. There was no confirmed time or place where Emma disappeared or with whom. The search of Paradise Ridge, one of the most hopeful areas, yielded no trace of Emma. If she had walked into the woods voluntarily, search teams should have found signs of her near the parking area. But there was nothing. If she had been taken into the woods, there should have been signs of a struggle, yet the scene was pristine. No second vehicle appeared near the lot. No witnesses reported anything unusual. No physical clues pointed the investigation in a specific direction. Emma Carlyle's file thus remained in a particularly difficult limbo. All suspicions circled Nathan, vague timeline, borrowed vehicle, the Tacoma's timely appearances, Sabrina's contradictory statements, but there was no forensic evidence to charge him. The investigators knew that requesting an arrest warrant in the current state would be rejected by prosecutors for lack of probable cause, and pressing Nathan harder in interrogation would likely lead him to stop answering or lawyer up. Broader steps such as thoroughly searching Nathan's home, seizing phones, or examining personal devices all required warrants based on direct evidence, something the case completely lacked. By the 10th day after Emma's disappearance, ground searches were scaled back because no priority areas remained. Volunteers gradually left, and special units could not maintain indefinite searches without new leads. The lead investigator compiled everything in the file and had to issue an interim conclusion that there was insufficient evidence to prove Emma had been abducted, murdered, or harmed herself. Her missing person case entered a true deadlock. By early 2004, with all field searches halted, every lead regarding Emma's movements ending in dead ends, and suspicions around Nathan Olmstead still only speculative, the Moscow Police Department faced a difficult decision: transfer the Emma Carlyle missing person file to the Idaho State Police Cold Case Unit for unsolved cases. Before handover, the lead investigator reviewed all documentation, from the explorer scene reports, witness statements, collected timelines, to the scattered forest items. The final summary clearly stated that the case completely lacked of direct evidence. No body, no DNA, no signs of violence, no camera footage of Emma after she left campus, and no proof anyone had contact with her near the time of disappearance. Items, such as the library card, glove, or hair clip, contained no biological traces and held no value in proving Emma was at Paradise Ridge after her vehicle was abandoned. Conversely, the complete absence of any trace of her in the forest made the explorer a suspicious scene, yet still legally insufficient to determine what actually happened. The investigative unit concluded that although numerous irregularities surrounded Nathan's and Sabrina's statements, they did not meet the legal standard for search warrants, arrest warrants, or more invasive investigation. There was no precise timeline for Emma's movements, no confirmed route, and no witness to any suspicious behavior during the disappearance window. There was also no evidence Emma left the Moscow area voluntarily or under duress. These information gaps prevented the case from progressing further, despite full resource mobilization in the first year. In March 2004, the file was officially transferred to the Idaho State Police per protocol for missing person cases unsolved after 12 months. The cold case unit received all materials, renumbered them, archived the physical evidence, and labeled the case as lacking direct evidence to continue criminal investigation, assigning it medium priority since there was no broader community threat. In subsequent years, Emma Carlyle's file was periodically reopened whenever new forensic technology emerged or a similar regional case appeared. However, each review reached the same conclusion: no new physical evidence, no additional witnesses, and no reports of Emma resurfacing or contacting family. Life in Moscow moved on, but Emma's file sat quietly in storage, marked with the cold case unit's yellow label. Each year, the team handling cold cases could spare only a few hours to reread the file and check whether any detail matched available modern technology. But for nearly 2 decades, everything remained frozen. No analysis broke the case's fragmented structure, no new leads surfaced, and no spontaneous statements altered the original findings. Emma Carlyle's case officially remained frozen for 17 consecutive years, a file buried deep in Idaho's cold case system, silent, directionless, and awaiting a breakthrough strong enough to open the door that the 2003 investigation could not force open. When the Emma Carlyle case file had sat untouched in the cold case unit archives for 17 years, with no movement, the investigation appeared to have reached a complete dead end, until early spring 2020, when a seemingly unrelated event occurred at a small house on the outskirts of Moscow, Idaho, the same house where Nathan Olmstead had lived in 2003. The home had belonged to new owners for many years, and a young family had just decided to renovate the old garage to create more storage space. While tearing down the rotted wooden wall panels, the contractor discovered an unusual hollow space between 2 studs. When he shone a flashlight inside, he saw a small cardboard box covered in thick dust, but still intact. At first he thought it was something the previous owner had simply forgotten, but the hiding place, deep inside the wall cavity, inaccessible unless someone deliberately tore the wall apart, made him feel something was off. The homeowners, after the contractor reported it, checked it themselves and immediately realized this was not something accidentally left behind. The thick dust, the hard-to-reach location, and the fact that the box had been concealed inside the wall all pointed to deliberate concealment. They decided to open the box right there on the spot. Inside, the first things that caught their attention were several sheets of paper folded into thirds, lightly yellowed with age. When the homeowner unfolded them, he saw lines of handwriting in bold pencil, listing times, brief location descriptions, and actions. 6:40, wake up. 6:50, make coffee. 7:05, leave house. 8:15, return. Check pillows, drive again. Some entries were crossed out or overwritten in ink, as if someone had tried to revise the timeline. Directly beneath the sheets was a black and white printed map of Moscow and the surrounding area. On the map, several locations were circled in red pen: Russell Elementary, Pelouse River Drive, Paradise Ridge Trailhead, and a spot near US 95. The exact area of the culvert where highway worker Harold Green had once reported seeing a Tacoma. There was also a fainter, harder-to-see circle, the ink faded, on the southeastern edge of the city. At the very bottom of the box was a Moscow Public Library card in the name of Emma Carlyle, matching the description of the library card fragments found scattered in the forest in 2003. But this card was completely clean, no mud, no scratches, proving it had never been exposed to the outdoor environment like the one found earlier. The discovery left the homeowners unwilling to keep the box even for a minute. That same evening, they took the entire box to the Moscow Police Department. When the desk officer saw what was inside, he immediately notified his superiors and contacted the Idaho State Police Cold Case Unit, where the Emma Carlyle file was stored. Within hours, ISP sent a team of investigators to take custody of the scene and seize the box under proper evidence chain procedures. They immediately sealed off the garage, photographed the wall structure, and measured the exact position of the box to determine when it might have been hidden. The first thing that grabbed the ISP team's attention was the timeline list. The notes resembled an alibi script, a rehearsed schedule designed to be repeated verbatim if questioned. The fact that the timeline had been edited multiple times with different pens suggested it may have been prepared over an extended period or in stages. Investigators paid particular attention to how this timeline matched the milestones Nathan had provided in 2003. Yet the version found in the box contained details Nathan had never mentioned in his original statements. This raised the possibility that the timeline was created before Nathan was ever interviewed, rather than being the natural memory he had always claimed. The map also raised a host of questions. Every circled location was directly tied to Emma's disappearance, except the faint circle in the southeast, a spot the 2003 investigation had never considered. The overlap between these locations and the real places mentioned in statements, surveillance footage, or clues from that year, led ISP to conclude that this was not random material hidden away. It was documentation directly related to Emma's movements, or at the very least, the movements of someone who knew what had happened to her. But most important of all was the library card in Emma's name. The cold case unit quickly cross-checked the 2003 records and confirmed that the card recovered from the Paradise Ridge forest was not the same as the one in the box. One card caked in mud, one card pristine, meaning two library cards linked to Emma now existed in the case, something never documented before, because the family had stated Emma only ever had a single integrated library card. This opened the possibility that someone had kept Emma's real card, while the broken card scattered in the forest may have been planted to mislead investigators. For ISP, this was no longer a minor find. It was new evidence capable of reshaping the entire case. That night, the cold case unit officially reopened the Emma Carlyle file for the first time in 17 years, changing its status code to reopened investigation. New evidence. Every document, piece of evidence, statement, and 2003 map was pulled out and compared against what had just surfaced in the box. The investigators knew they were facing the breakthrough the case had waited nearly 2 decades for, evidence that could finally crack the wall of silence surrounding Emma's disappearance. Since 2003. Immediately after the box of documents was discovered in Nathan's former garage and the cold case unit officially reopened the Emma Carlyle file, the first step Idaho State Police took was to conduct a full forensic re-examination of every piece of evidence collected in 2003, a process that technology at the time had not allowed to be performed thoroughly. In 2020, with advances in touch DNA, microscopic surface analysis, and mitochondrial DNA capable of reading genetic material from damaged hairs without roots, ISP decided to retest even the smallest samples, including the mud-covered library card, the gloves, the hair clip, dust from the Tacoma's floorboards, and especially the hair recovered from the truck seat that could not be identified in 2003. All evidence was sent to the state lab in Meridian, which specializes in cold case backlogs. The lead investigator in this new phase stressed that every item from 2003 had been stored reasonably well under standard protocols, meaning successful DNA recovery was still possible if degradation was not total. The forensic technicians began with touch DNA on the library card found in Paradise Ridge. In 2003, mud and moisture had yielded negative results, but in 2020, the ability to capture skin cell DNA, even in tiny amounts, offered fresh hope. Technicians used micro swabs along the card's edges where fingers typically touch. After extraction and amplification, the results showed a very faint DNA profile, not complete enough for a CODIS entry, but with markers that matched the reference DNA of Emma Carlyle taken in 2003 from personal items at her home. This was the first time any evidence recovered from Paradise Ridge carried Emma's DNA, even weakly, and it strongly suggested the broken card fragments really had belonged to her or had been carried with her belongings. However, touch DNA also detected a second, unidentifiable profile that did not match Emma, hinting someone else had handled the card. The team logged this for later comparison. Next came the gray gloves recovered from the bushes. The gloves showed no blood or bodily fluids, but touch DNA revealed a mixed profile containing segments consistent with a male contributor. The sample was too degraded for a conclusive match. Notably, there was no clear Emma DNA, raising questions about whether the gloves had actually belonged to her or had been left by someone else. The hair clip found under leaves was analyzed using touch DNA as well. The sample was so small that technicians used direct swab to amplification, skipping extraction to avoid losing material. Results showed female consistent DNA, but not enough loci to confirm it was Emma. However, one significant detail emerged. The tiny DNA profile on the clip was consistent with the DNA recovered from the broken library card, suggesting both items may have been in contact with the same source. After the Paradise Ridge items, technicians moved to the dust, fiber, and especially the hair recovered from the passenger seat of the Tacoma. In 2003, that hair had been deemed rootless and could not be tested with standard autosomal DNA. In 2020, mitochondrial DNA, MIT DNA, which can be sequenced from the hair shaft alone, became the key tool. The hair was processed in a sterile environment, sliced thin, heated to separate layers, and mtDNA was extracted. The resulting profile was immediately compared to the maternal reference sample from Emma's mother, stored in 2003 for identification purposes. After 6 hours of analysis, the result came back, a complete match to Emma Carlyle's mtDNA haplogroup. This not only confirmed the hair in the Tacoma belonged to Emma, but marked the first time direct physical evidence linked Emma to the vehicle Nathan had borrowed on the exact day she vanished. For the cold case unit, this was a major turning point. Investigators noted that nothing in the entire 2003 file could previously place Emma in contact with the Tacoma. She did not know Pavel, had no reason to get into his truck, and had never driven it. Therefore, Emma's hair on the passenger seat could not be explained by coincidence. The result also reinforced suspicion that the Tacoma was directly involved in Emma's movements that morning. Dust samples from the truck floor were examined under an electron microscope for fabric fibers, clothing threads, or skin cells. Some polyester fibers matched the description of the jacket Emma often wore in fall, but polyester is common, so it was neither confirmatory nor exculpatory. Still, Emma's hair in the truck completely shifted the investigation's focus. Continuing with the clean library card from the hidden box, forensic technicians applied touch DNA to its surface. Results showed strong, clear DNA predominantly from Emma, far clearer than on the mud-covered card from 2003. This proved the card in the box was her authentic one, making the planted card theory in the forest even more suspicious. When the forensic re-examination concluded, investigators compiled the data: Emma's hair in the Tacoma, strong Emma DNA on the hidden card, faint Emma DNA on the forest card, and consistent trace evidence across multiple items. All of it converged on a conclusion never before reached in the file. The Tacoma Nathan borrowed had direct contact with Emma during the window of her disappearance, and someone had attempted to mislead investigators by scattering evidence in the forest. This was the first legally significant evidence capable of changing the direction of the Emma Carlyle investigation after 17 years on ice. Immediately after the forensic results confirmed Emma's hair in the Tacoma Nathan had borrowed, Idaho State Police decided to re-examine the full 2003 ATM video footage, a tape that had been reviewed during the original investigation, but was so poor in quality that neither the license plate nor the driver could be identified. In 2020, with the help of AI forensic enhancement, imaging specialists at the Meridian Lab began reprocessing the video to modern standards. The original analog VHS tape was digitized. It suffered from severe glare, horizontal lines, camera shake, and pixel breakup. All that could originally be seen was the vague shape of a red Tacoma, passing the lower left corner of the frame. The team first applied geometric stabilization software to correct the shaking caused by wind and vibration on the old metal ATM pole. Once stabilized, the vehicle's outline became sharper. Next, they broke the video into individual frames and ran deep learning contrast enhancement algorithms to differentiate areas of similar brightness that had blended together in the raw footage. Another algorithm restored object edges, making the truck bed, cabin, and front bumper visible, details that had been nearly invisible. Still, the image remained blurry, especially the license plate, because the 2003 camera recorded at low resolution and at an oblique angle. To address this, specialists applied AI super resolution, reconstructing missing pixels based on models trained on thousands of Idaho plates from that era. In the 3 frames where the Tacoma passed, a small, bright patch at the rear gradually resolved into discrete characters, an 8, then a shape resembling a T, and a final digit that looked like a 7 or 1. Initially, these were only educated guesses, not evidence grade. The forensic team then stacked the frames into a composite average image that retained stable pixels and eliminated random noise. The averaged frame was dramatically clearer. The plate now read something like 8T7, with the rest obscured by glare. When cross-referenced with Idaho's 2003 vehicle registry, only one red Toyota Tacoma in the entire Moscow-Pullman area had a plate beginning with 8T and ending with a 7 or similar, Pavel Gunnison's truck. This was a huge step forward. The first time the previously unusable ATM video could be directly tied to Pavel's Tacoma. The team then applied further AI enhancement to the cabin area to attempt driver identification. The face remained too blurry for recognition. But one critical detail emerged: the silhouette of a person in the passenger seat. The image was not sharp enough for gender or identity, but it was unmistakable that the Tacoma had at least 2 occupants, directly contradicting Nathan's statement that he drove alone to Pullman. Investigators took special note when comparing this to Sabrina's claim that Nathan was still home at 7:15 a.m. If the Tacoma appeared on the ATM video between approximately 7:10 and 7:12 a.m., Sabrina's statement was completely false and could not be a simple time mistake. The cold case unit immediately flagged the enhanced video as visual evidence re-establishing the timeline. Next, forensic imaging analyzed the truck's direction of travel. By matching the ATM camera's known position at Jackson and a street, the Tacoma was traveling toward Palos River Drive, the same direction Emma's Explorer was last seen, heading after leaving Russell Elementary. This created a serious intersection between 2 previously unprovable timelines. Finally, specialists compared an old decal on Pavel's truck bed, Gunnison Supply, slightly crooked on the left side, and partially faded, with the ATM footage. When zoomed in, a dark patch in the exact location and shape of the decal appeared in the video. The final report concluded that the truck in the ATM video matched Pavel's actual Tacoma at 87–92% confidence. Enough to state it was not just any red Tacoma, but the exact vehicle Nathan was borrowing on the day Emma vanished. For the first time in 17 years, visual evidence confirmed that Pavel's Tacoma, driven by Nathan, appeared at the precise time Emma disappeared, in the exact area she had last been seen, and with at least 2 people inside instead of 1. This broke the case's biggest logjam, proving the Tacoma's presence in the real timeline and completely disproving Nathan's account of his morning movements in 2003. After the AI-enhanced ATM video confirmed Pavel's Tacoma was present at the right time and traveling in the right direction on the morning Emma vanished, the cold case unit reopened another lead that had been dismissed as insufficient in 2003. A handwritten letter from a now-deceased witness mailed to the Moscow Police Department nearly a year after the disappearance, but which yielded no investigative value at the time. The witness, Richard Halverson, an elderly resident near the Snake River, had written that late in the morning of the day Emma disappeared, he believed he saw a red pickup truck, shaped like a Toyota Tacoma, stopped for a few minutes near the Granite Point rock ledge. At the time there were no cameras in the area, and because Halverson provided no plate or driver description, 2003 investigators logged the letter, but could not corroborate it. When the case was reopened in 2020, with Emma's hair in the Tacoma and the ATM video placing the truck in the area shortly after Emma left the school, the cold case unit decided to re-evaluate everything Richard Halverson had provided. Because he had passed away in 2011, the team had to verify his statement indirectly. They first confirmed the location of Halverson's home, approximately 25 minutes from Moscow and less than 3 air miles from Granite Point. 2003 note showed he regularly walked the Snake River rim on cool mornings, and the day Emma disappeared matched his routine, making it more credible that he was actually where he claimed. The team examined 2003 topographic maps of Granite Point and compared them to 2020 satellite imagery to determine whether the spot he described, offered from his walking path, could see a truck. Results showed the section of ledge he frequented had a direct sightline down to a small flat area beside the river, where a pickup could park largely hidden from the highway above. From below, a walker could easily identify the color and body style of a vehicle. Investigators also reviewed 2003 trail maintenance logs for Granite Point and found that tree cover along the path was significantly thinner than today, giving a much wider field of view and increasing the likelihood Halverson saw what he described. They then assessed the reasonableness of his stated time frame, mid-morning before it got too hot, which aligned with 9 o'clock, 11 a.m. in late September in Idaho, perfectly consistent with a truck that left Moscow after the 700-plus ATM sighting. The team checked Idaho Fish and Game River Patrol reports for traffic on the Snake River that day. While anglers and kayakers were present, none reported a suspicious pickup. However, the parking spot sat behind a small rock shelf, easily missed by people on the water. To further support the possibility that Tacoma had been near the Snake River, investigators modeled Nathan's potential route using geographic data. Leaving Moscow after 7 a.m., heading south on US 95, and turning onto the Granite Point access road, placed arrival exactly within Halverson's window. This also aligned seamlessly with Harold Green's earlier sighting of a red Tacoma near a US 95 culvert around 7:30, 7:45 a.m., a logical detour en route to Granite Point. When all of Halverson's information was cross-checked against the expanded 2020 evidence, the cold case unit concluded it was highly feasible that the Tacoma Nathan borrowed had in fact been at the Snake River that morning, an assertion never confirmed in 2003. Finally, ISP reviewed weather data for that day to confirm lighting and morning fog would allow clear color identification. Records showed fog lifting by 8:30 a.m., well within the witness's time frame, creating no natural contradiction. After weighing location, sightlines, timing, light conditions, route logic, and convergence with other leads, the cold case unit officially elevated the deceased witness's letter to valuable circumstantial evidence, supporting the theory that the Tacoma traveled from Moscow to the Granite Point area on the morning of 2003. This further undermined Nathan's timeline and moved the Emma Carlyle investigation one critical step closer to establishing the truck's key stops on the day she vanished. The verification of the deceased witness's letter and the confirmation of the feasibility of the Tacoma appearing at Snake River forced the cold case unit to return to the only person who could confirm the unusual changes related to the vehicle in 2003. Pavel Gunnison, the legal owner of the Tacoma, when invited by the Idaho State Police ISP for a second interview in 2020, Pavel appeared surprised that the case had been reopened, but he agreed to cooperate fully. At first, Pavel repeated his old statement. Nathan had borrowed the truck because his own car was in the shop, picked it up in the evening, and returned it in the afternoon on the day Emma disappeared. But when investigators presented the new findings, Emma's hair in the Tacoma the enhanced ATM video, and the lead about the US 95 route, Pavel began to waver. After a few minutes of silence, he admitted he had concealed one crucial detail for 17 years because he didn't want to get involved in someone else's business. Pavel said that on the night Nathan returned the truck, around nearly 10 p.m., Nathan called him and said the passenger seat was loose and needed to be replaced because it was uncomfortable to sit in. Pavel, who was used to working on vehicles himself, went out to the garage with Nathan and saw that Nathan had already removed one of the seat bolts and was struggling to pry the frame loose. When Pavel asked why the seat was damaged, Nathan gave a vague answer that Pavel's stuff was too old. But Nathan's behavior struck Pavel as abnormal. He kept looking around, spoke faster than usual, and avoided eye contact. In the end, Pavel helped him completely remove the front passenger seat. Nathan suggested he just throw the old seat away, but Pavel refused because it was the original seat that came with the truck. Instead of discarding it, he stored the seat in the far back corner of the woodworking shed behind the garage, planning to look for a matching replacement whenever he had time. That was why Pavel had never mentioned the incident before. He said he thought Nathan had simply damaged the seat and was embarrassed and wanted to hide it. When Pavel described the exact location where he had stored the seat, ISP asked him to take them there. After clearing away a layer of lumber and toolboxes, the investigators saw a dusty but intact 2001 Toyota Tacoma passenger seat. The seat was immediately sealed and transported to the forensic lab in Meridian. In the lab, technicians used specialized lighting to scan the fabric surface. Within minutes, faint stains appeared, not blood, but dried bodily fluids. Some concentrations were along the lower edge of the seat and the seat back. Samples were collected using micro-swab techniques and sent for DNA analysis. 2 days later, the results came back. The fluid on the seat contained DNA that was a 100% match to Emma Carlyle's genetic profile obtained from her personal items in 2003. This was the strongest evidence since the case was reopened. Emma's DNA on the Tacoma's passenger seat proved she had been inside the vehicle at or near the time she vanished. More importantly, the DNA was on the passenger seat, not the driver's seat, suggesting Emma was not driving the Tacoma, but was placed in the passenger position. Additionally, a second DNA sample, not Emma's, was found on the seat's armrest corner, possibly belonging to the person who pulled, lifted, or handled Emma inside the vehicle. This result instantly changed the entire direction of the investigation. When investigators returned to inform Pavel, he was visibly shaken, saying he had no idea it was this serious, and admitting that Nathan had exhibited a series of unusual behaviors in the days surrounding Emma's disappearance. Pavel recalled that 2 days before Emma went missing, Nathan borrowed the truck in a hurried and restless manner. When he returned it, he was unusually eager to clean the interior, completely out of character for someone who was normally lazy about cleaning. Pavel clearly remembered Nathan wiping down the dashboard with a cloth and even vacuuming the floor mats with the family vacuum, something he had never done before. Moreover, Nathan repeatedly asked Pavel whether anyone else had touched the truck, a question Pavel at the time thought was just Nathan being worried about scratches. All of these behaviors, combined with the midnight request to replace the seat, turned Pavel's testimony into a critical piece of the puzzle the ISP was reassembling. The final detail Pavel provided was that on the very night Emma disappeared, Nathan called him about 10 minutes before coming to the garage, sounding urgent and slightly shaky, saying everything is a mess, and asking Pavel to help remove the seat immediately. Pavel hadn't understood the meaning at the time, but now realized it could have a different significance. When the interview ended, ISP officially recorded Pavel Gunnison's new statement as key evidence, not only because it led to the old seat containing Emma's DNA, but also because Nathan's series of suspicious actions provided concrete grounds to prove Nathan attempted to dispose of the seat to eliminate traces. This was the first time in nearly 2 decades that a person directly connected to the incident had given legally significant testimony, allowing the cold case unit to take a major step forward in reconstructing what happened on the morning Emma Carlyle disappeared. After Pavel Gunnison's new statement led to the recovery of the Tacoma passenger seat bearing Emma's DNA, the cold case unit concluded that the truck's route from the ATM camera to the witness letter lead at Granite Point and back to the previously superficially noted evidence at the US 95 drainage culvert most likely represented the route used to dispose of evidence or Emma's personal belongings on the morning she vanished. Using 2020 forensic technology, ISP decided to re-examine the location originally reported by highway worker Harold Green, this time equipped with endoscopic drones, 4K pipe cameras, thermal sensors, and a high-powered sludge pump designed for underground recovery operations. Upon arrival, the technical team immediately deployed the endoscopic drone into the culvert, a nearly 40-meter-long pipe that was low and gently curved with the terrain. The drone was controlled from a tablet, its LED lights scanning through layers of mud, debris, and years of accumulated organic material. Compared to the manual inspection in 2003, the imagery was now crystal clear. Tree roots piercing concrete cracks, hardened mud layers, and sharp objects like cans, pine needles, and small animal bones were all visible. As the drone reached the second bend, just before a deeper pooling section, the technician noticed a long, soft object pressed against the pipe wall, covered in such thick mud that it was impossible to identify visually. The drone rescanned with infrared and detected a two-layer structure, typical of a deteriorated plastic garbage bag. The high-powered sludge pump was lowered against the flow. As the mud was gradually sucked away, the object beneath emerged, a black garbage bag roughly half-rotted, with the mouth torn, but the body still held together by caked mud. The bag was retrieved with specialized grips, placed on a sterile tarp to avoid contaminating evidence. The forensic team began carefully removing layers of mud from the surface, noting the bag's decomposition was consistent with nearly 17 years in a damp environment. Inside the bag, small items began to appear, first a thin cloth handkerchief with pastel patterns so faded they were barely visible, but still showed traces of original embroidery. Emma's family in 2003 had described her always carrying embroidered handkerchiefs, and the colors matched their description. Next, technicians found a small black hair clip, almost identical to ones previously recovered, scattered in the Paradise Ridge forest. But this one was undamaged and cleaner, consistent with being placed inside a bag rather than dropped outdoors. A pale blue thin fabric fragment was also recovered, with delicate circular stitching typical of the soft cotton used in light jackets or layering tops. Emma often wore in early fall weather. Because the fabric was partially decomposed, the exact garment could not yet be confirmed. But its presence in the rotted bag led investigators to note it could be a piece of the clothing Emma was wearing the day she disappeared. All items were bagged, sealed, and transported immediately to the lab. Forensic technicians began scanning the bag's surface for latent fingerprints. Despite the deterioration, areas of intact plastic can still retain old oil residue prints recoverable through specialized analysis. Under ultraviolet light and adjusted wavelengths, a partial fingerprint appeared near the bag's mouth, imperfect but with enough ridge detail for comparison. The print was run through AFIS and directly compared to fingerprints of individuals from the 2003 case file. Less than half an hour later, the system reported a 12-point ridge match with Sabrina Mendoza's stored print. When the cold case unit reviewed the old files, Sabrina had no legitimate reason to handle Emma's personal items, and certainly no reason to discard a garbage bag into the US 95 culvert on the morning Emma disappeared. The fingerprints location, on the bag's mouth, the exact spot requiring force to tie or open, indicated direct, deliberate handling. Investigators noted in the report that the print was in a location rarely left accidentally, proving intentional manipulation rather than incidental contact. Forensic analysis continued on the fabric fragments, documenting fiber structure, color, and fade patterns, then comparing them to clothing samples collected from Emma in 2003. Several weave characteristics matched the type of light jacket Emma frequently wore, though not yet conclusive. However, when combined with the embroidered handkerchief and hair clip, both distinctive to Emma, the cold case unit concluded the garbage bag recovered from the US 95 culvert had a very high probability of containing the victim's personal belongings. Most critically, Sabrina's matching fingerprint turned the bag into the first piece of physical evidence, directly linking her to the disposal of Emma's items. When all data from the culvert site was compiled, the investigative team recorded that the discovery location, the bag's condition, the relevance of the contents, and Sabrina's fingerprint were the new key that finally pierced the fog that had shrouded the case. The US 95 culvert, once overlooked due to 2003 equipment limitations, had now become a pivotal point in reconstructing the evidence disposal journey related to Emma Carlyle on the day she vanished. From all the forensic data, new statements, the enhanced ATM video, and the evidence recovered from the US 95 culvert, the cold case unit entered its most critical phase, reconstructing the complete timeline of Emma Carlyle's disappearance on the morning of September 25, 2003, as a single continuous logical sequence rather than the fragmented original file. The reconstruction relied on 4 data groups: Tacoma movement, forensic evidence, new and old physical evidence, and 2003 statements, cross-referenced against 2020 inconsistencies. First, forensic analysts fixed 7:03 a.m. as the moment Emma left Russell Elementary after dropping off her child, based on teacher and security guard statements and school camera positions. In the same time window, home security footage from across Nathan's house showed Pavel's Tacoma leaving Nathan's residence at 7:05, directly contradicting Sabrina's claim that Nathan was still home at 7:15. From there, the timeline established 2 separate routes: Emma heading along Pelouse Drive, while the Tacoma exited onto Jackson Street and was captured on the ATM camera between 7:10–7:12, traveling toward Pelouse River Drive. AI-enhanced analysis confirmed the license plate belonged to Pavel's Tacoma and, crucially, showed 2 occupants in the cabin, contrary to Nathan's claim he was alone. Based on average speed and turn direction, analysts calculated the Tacoma traveled the same route and within the same time frame as Emma's usual path home. This created an overlap window between 7:08 and 7:14. The Tacoma had the opportunity to intercept Emma either while she was driving or had just stopped. One of the timeline segments marked in red as critical. After leaving the ATM camera's view, the Tacoma was placed near the US 95 culvert area between approximately 7:35, based on highway worker Harold Green's statement, now rated highly credible by ISP because it aligned with the truck's direction and feasible timing. The culvert mouth lies directly on the route from Moscow to Snake River, matching the deceased witness Richard Halverson's letter. Thus, analysts set 7:38 o'clock as the window when the Tacoma stopped for initial evidence disposal, the rotted garbage bag containing the handkerchief, clothing fragment, hair clip, and Sabrina's fingerprint. Importantly, the items were discarded before the periodic water release cycle raised the flow level, proving they were placed during early morning low flow. The timeline then continued with the Tacoma's journey to Granite Point. Witness Halverson described the truck arriving mid-morning before it got hot. Analysts cross-referenced that day's weather records to pinpoint the most likely window, 8:29 a.m. This matched the travel time required for the Tacoma to leave the US 95 culvert, drive 12–15 minutes down to Snake River, and reach the Granite Point parking area. Another red flag was added between 8:20 and 9 o'clock. The Tacoma stopped at Snake River. The same location marked on the map found hidden in the wall, indicating a pre-planned route. The cold case unit then factored in the DNA on the Tacoma seat. The passenger seat contained Emma's bodily fluid DNA, while the driver's seat had none, meaning Emma was not driving but riding as a passenger, most likely incapacitated. Based on the stain distribution pattern along the seat back and lower edge, analysts noted the marks were not consistent with normal sitting, but showed sliding or slumping characteristic of unconsciousness. From this, the timeline formed a reasonable hypothesis between 7:10, 7:15 Emma was approached, subdued or placed into the Tacoma. Next, analysts incorporated the previously omitted detail of the seat removal that same night at Nathan's urgent request to Pavel. Nathan's attempt to dispose of the passenger seat less than 12 hours after Emma vanished was classified as urgent evidence destruction, and another time marker was added, 19 o'clock, 21:30 that evening, when Nathan cleaned the truck and asked Pavel to remove the seat. When all data was combined, the cold case unit produced a seamless timeline with none of the gaps that existed in 2003. Nighters 7:01, 7:03. Emma leaves the school, 7:05. Tacoma leaves Nathan's house, 7:10, 7:12. Tacoma appears on ATM video with 2 people inside, 7:30, 7:45. Tacoma stops at US 95 culvert for evidence disposal, 8:20, 9 o'clock. Tacoma appears at Snake River, 17 o'clock, 20, 2 o'clock. Nathan attempts to remove passenger seat to eliminate DNA. Finally, analysts highlighted the highest probability offense window, 7:08, 7:20 a.m., when Emma's and the Tacoma's routes intersected and the truck first showed signs of irregularity. For the first time in 17 years, the entire sequence of events was linked into a single, logical, continuous, and complete narrative, providing the cold case unit with a solid legal foundation to move into the next phase of the investigation. The 4th interview with Sabrina Mendoza was conducted immediately after the forensic timeline was finalized, because by that point, Sabrina was no longer a vague, inconsistent witness, but the only person besides Nathan who appeared at every critical juncture. Her fingerprint on the mouth of the garbage bag containing Emma's belongings, the presence of a passenger seat occupant in the enhanced ATM video, and Pavel's account of Nathan demanding the seat be removed that night. All of it cornered her inescapably. At Idaho State Police headquarters, Sabrina sat at the interview table, visibly more tense than in any previous session. Gone was the vague confusion or mechanical, "I don't remember," denials, because ISP now brought every new piece of evidence, forensic images, and conclusions for direct confrontation. Investigators began by laying out the new findings. Pavel's Tacoma on the ATM camera at 7:10, 7:12, with 2 people inside. Emma's hair found on the passenger seat. The removed seat containing Emma's DNA. The garbage bag recovered from the US 95 culvert containing Emma's handkerchief and personal items. And most importantly, Sabrina's fingerprint on the bag's mouth. When her fingerprint was mentioned, Sabrina clenched her hands tightly, and her eyes darted as if looking for an escape. The investigator asked Sabrina to explain why her fingerprint was on the mouth of a bag containing Emma's possession. Sabrina was silent for nearly 30 seconds before saying it must be a mistake. The investigator immediately placed the sealed bag in front of her, pointed to the exact location of the print, and said, "This is not a spot you touch by accident. This is the only place you apply force to tie or open the bag. You handled this bag." Sabrina pushed back in her chair, voice trembling, repeating that she didn't remember, but the investigator continued with the ATM video, clear footage of the Tacoma at 7:12, showing the silhouette of someone in the passenger seat. "That's not Nathan. That person is smaller, narrower shoulders. That's you." Sabrina denied it, but no longer with the firm certainty of 2003. Her voice was shaky and weak. The investigator pressed with the timeline. Nathan left the house at 7:05. The Tacoma is on camera at 7:10. The bag is discarded at the culvert 7:30, 7:45. And your fingerprint is on the mouth of that bag. That means you were present the entire time. Sabrina began to show signs of mild panic, speaking rapidly that she didn't know anything about the disappearance and was just doing what Nathan told her. For the first time in 17 years, Sabrina acknowledged her own involvement. The investigator seized the moment before she could backtrack. "Were you riding with Nathan in the truck that morning? Emma disappeared." Sabrina gave a very slight nod, almost inaudible. The investigator asked her to say it clearly. "Were you in the Tacoma that morning?" Sabrina answered, "Yes, I was in the passenger seat." That was critical. The passenger seat was where forensic examiners found Emma's hair and DNA on the discarded seat. When asked if Emma was in the vehicle, Sabrina covered her face with both hands, sobbed, and said, "I didn't see her. Nathan wouldn't let me look. I just knew there was something in the back seat." The investigator continued, "Why did you help Nathan throw the garbage bag into the culvert?" Sabrina admitted Nathan handed her the bag and told her to hold the mouth tight while he found a place to toss it. She said she didn't know what was inside, only that Nathan was extremely stressed, driving way too fast, and said everything had to be cleaned up before anyone found out. When asked why she never reported this in 2003, Sabrina said, "Nathan threatened that if she talked, he would put all the blame on her and they would both go to prison." Sabrina further admitted that after discarding the bag at the US 95 culvert, Nathan drove to Granite Point and stopped there for 20-30 minutes. When asked what he did during that time, Sabrina said, "He dragged something heavy out of the truck bed. I didn't help. I stayed in the truck. I didn't want to know." That detail matched the deceased witness, Richard Halverson's, observation of a red Tacoma stopped at Granite Point that morning. When confronted about the seat removal that night, Sabrina acknowledged Nathan said the seat had something on it that couldn't stay, and she stood nearby while Nathan called Pavel to take the seat out. At this point, Sabrina completely broke down, repeatedly pleading to tell the truth but not go to jail, showing she fully understood the gravity of the forensic evidence. The investigator concluded the interview by requiring Sabrina to clearly state her role that morning. Sabrina made 3 critical admissions. 1. She was in the Tacoma with Nathan when he left the house at 7:05. 2. She personally held the mouth of the garbage bag containing Emma's belongings while Nathan discarded it into the culvert. 3. She was present when Nathan stopped at Granite Point to handle something heavy, although she did not directly participate. With these 3 admissions, Sabrina officially moved from the category of inconsistent witness to accomplice in the post-offense disposal of evidence, opening an entirely new chain of legal conclusions for the cold case unit. Sabrina Mendoza's admission that she accompanied Nathan throughout the entire morning of September 25, 2003, from the moment the Tacoma left the house to throwing the trash bag into the US 95 culvert to stopping at Granite Point, finally completed the missing piece of the forensic timeline and provided the Idaho State Police with sufficiently strong legal grounds to obtain an arrest warrant for Nathan Olmstead after the case had been frozen for 17 years. The cold case unit immediately coordinated with the Latah County Prosecutor's Office to prepare the charging documents. With Emma's DNA on the Tacoma's seat, ATM video confirming Nathan was driving with an accomplice, Sabrina's fingerprints on the trash bag containing Emma's belongings, and Sabrina's statement about disposing of evidence, the prosecutor approved 3 main charges: kidnapping in the first degree, felony obstruction of justice, and felony evidence tampering. Although a homicide charge could not yet be filed due to the absence of a body or direct evidence of death, investigators emphasized that the existing evidence was strong enough to designate Nathan as the prime suspect in Emma Carlyle's disappearance. After the Latah County magistrate issued the warrant, the cold case unit worked with U.S. Marshals to execute a covert arrest to prevent Nathan from fleeing. Through tracking of bank card activity, cell phone records, and employment data, ISP determined that Nathan was living in Lewiston, Idaho, about 30 miles south of Moscow, where he worked for a local trucking company. At 5:20 a.m., a task force of 8 officers, including 2 investigators who had worked the Emma Carlyle case since 2003, approached the small apartment complex on 8th Street where Nathan rented a unit. They split into 3 teams, 1 at the front door, 1 blocking the rear stairwell, and 1 positioned to cover the bedroom window to prevent escape. When the standard knock and announce was executed, there was no answer. After 3 demands to open the door via bullhorn, the team leader ordered the use of a breaching tool. The door flew open, officers flooded in with weapons drawn, but Nathan did not run. He was standing in the middle of the living room, barefoot, wearing wrinkled pajamas, his face dazed from being abruptly awakened. As the commanding officer read the arrest warrant aloud, listing the charges, kidnapping, felony obstruction, tampering with evidence, Nathan immediately reacted violently, shouting that he didn't do anything and that Emma left on her own. Officers subdued him using standard control techniques, handcuffed him, searched his person, and walked him to the patrol car. While being escorted out, Nathan kept asking, "What did Sabrina tell you people? You don't have any evidence." The investigators did not respond, simply reminding him of his right to remain silent. En route from Lewiston to ISP headquarters in Moscow, Nathan jerked against the restraints, repeatedly demanded to speak to a lawyer immediately, and refused to answer any questions. Once placed in a holding cell, Nathan appeared agitated, pacing constantly in the small space, as if trying to stay calm. His demeanor shifted noticeably when investigators showed him the arrest warrant, supported by 3 categories of evidence. Emma's hair in the Tacoma, the passenger seat replaced that same night, containing Emma's DNA, and the enhanced ATM video clearly showing 2 people in the truck. Nathan offered no rebuttal to any specific detail. He only repeated that Sabrina had betrayed him, a reaction immediately noted as a significant psychological indicator. That same afternoon, ISP announced Nathan Olmstead's arrest to the media with a brief statement. "This is a major development in the 2003 disappearance of Emma Carlyle. The investigation has reached the evidentiary threshold necessary to proceed with legal action." In Lewiston, neighbors were shocked to learn that the quiet man living in the second-floor apartment had been arrested for kidnapping in a case nearly 2 decades old. The Moscow community was even more stunned. The name Nathan Olmstead, suspected in 2003 but never charged, had suddenly returned to the center of a case that had gathered dust for 17 years. The arrest was swift, precise, and met with no violent resistance, marking the decisive moment that moved the Emma Carlyle case from unsolved missing person to a full criminal investigation, with an official suspect in custody. After Nathan Olmstead was arrested in Lewiston and charged with 3 felony counts, the Cold Case Unit and Leda County Prosecutor's Office immediately shifted focus to their second target, Sabrina Mendoza, who had evolved from a key early witness to an active accomplice in multiple acts of obstructing the investigation and tampering with evidence, based on her 4th statement, fingerprints, and forensic data. The prosecutor formally approved 3 charges against Sabrina: conspiracy to commit a felony, felony evidence tampering, and providing false statements in a criminal investigation. Although Sabrina had cooperated to some extent during her final interview, Idaho law does not permit immunity when evidence proves direct participation in evidence disposal in a serious missing person case. An arrest warrant was signed by the magistrate the following morning, and ISP located Sabrina's current residence through employment records and rental agreements. She was living in Meridian, Idaho, more than 4 hours' drive from Moscow. An arrest team was formed consisting of 3 cold case unit investigators and 2 officers from the Meridian Police Department, since Sabrina had no history of violence and was not considered dangerous. However, the risk that she might flee after learning of Nathan's arrest was deemed high, so the arrest was executed the same day to prevent information from leaking. At 6:45 a.m., officers approached Sabrina's apartment in a quiet complex. One officer knocked according to protocol, while 2 others covered the rear escape routes. Sabrina opened the door, already dressed for work, apparently preparing to leave. When she saw the 3 officers, her face went pale instantly, as if she had known this moment was coming the second she told the truth in her previous interview. The officer read the warrant, listing each charge: conspiracy, tampering with evidence, providing false statements, and ordered her to turn around for cuffing. She offered no resistance, standing motionless, as if drained of strength. While being handcuffed, Sabrina whispered, "I already told you everything. I didn't plan to run. I knew this was coming." An officer read her Miranda rights again and assured her she would be able to speak with an attorney at the station. As she was walked down the stairs, Sabrina began crying silently and repeatedly said, "Nathan told me it would be okay. Nathan said no one would ever find anything." A statement that inadvertently confirmed the evidence disposal had been pre-planned, strengthening the conspiracy charge. At Meridian Police Department headquarters, Sabrina was placed in a holding cell. The investigator from Moscow, who had conducted her fourth interview, arrived and sat across from her. Per procedure, she was asked whether she would voluntarily surrender personal devices for analysis. After a brief hesitation, Sabrina said yes and handed over her phone, laptop, and a small box of personal documents, all of which were sealed according to protocol. This did not reduce her charges, but demonstrated cooperation that could be considered later. After the arrest paperwork was completed, the report was sent to Moscow. Sabrina had been safely taken into custody in Meridian. Word spread within ISP before being released publicly. The two individuals who claimed in 2003 to know nothing were now both under arrest for offenses directly tied to Emma Carlyle's disappearance. While being escorted to the cell, a female officer heard Sabrina murmur, "I wanted to tell the truth a long time ago, but Nathan kept me quiet, and I was scared." That emotional statement, however, could not alter the legal reality. Sabrina had actively helped Nathan tie the trash bag containing Emma's belongings, was present when Nathan stopped at Granite Point, and lied to investigators for 17 years, actions that all constitute felonies under Idaho law. When ISP announced Sabrina's arrest, the statement read, "Today's arrest is the result of forensic evidence, new statements, and an intensive reinvestigation. The investigation is ongoing. No one is above the law." In Moscow, the local community followed developments closely. Many were stunned to learn that Sabrina, who had appeared in 2003 as a helpful witness, had become an accomplice in concealing Emma's disappearance. In Meridian, neighbors were equally surprised to see police take Sabrina away, knowing her only as a mild-mannered grocery store employee with no outward red flags. But for the cold case unit, Sabrina's arrest was pivotal. The case structure had shifted from one prime suspect and an inconsistent witness to two co-defendants, with Sabrina playing a supporting role in evidence disposal and obstruction. As the cell door closed, Sabrina Mendoza officially became a critical link in a case once thought buried for 17 years. Once Sabrina Mendoza was in custody in Meridian and began limited cooperation with investigators, the cold case unit turned its focus to the decisive next step, a full confrontation with Nathan Olmstead, who was being held in Moscow and had consistently denied all allegations since his arrest, maintaining that Emma left on her own. This time, however, Nathan was no longer facing mere suspicion or speculation as he had in 2003. He now faced modern forensic evidence. Sabrina's statements, a minute-by-minute reconstructed timeline, and physical evidence he could no longer dismiss with simple explanations. The confrontation took place in the largest interview room at Idaho State Police headquarters. Attended by 3 cold case unit investigators and the Lewiston County prosecutor. Nathan was brought in handcuffed in front, his face tense but still trying to appear defiant. When the investigator opened the thick case file in front of him, Nathan leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms as if preparing to hear claims he believed he could deny. The interview began with the forensic conclusions: Emma Carlyle's hair recovered from the borrowed Tacoma. Emma's bodily fluid DNA on the passenger seat. He removed the same night she vanished. Sabrina Mendoza's clear fingerprints on the mouth of the trash bag containing Emma's embroidered handkerchief, hair clip, and fabric from her clothing. And the enhanced 2003 ATM video confirming 2 people in the truck at 7:10 a.m., exactly when Nathan claimed he was driving alone to Pullman. When the stabilized ATM footage appeared on the screen, clearly showing 2 silhouettes moving inside the Tacoma cab, Nathan leaned forward, eyes wide, but tried to stay calm and said, "A blurry video like that doesn't prove anything." The investigator did not argue and moved to the forensic timeline. 7:01. Emma leaves school. 7:05 Tacoma leaves Nathan's house. 7:10 Tacoma. Appears on ATM camera, 7:30. Tacoma stops at the US 95 culvert, where Sabrina admitted they threw the trash bag together. 8:20. 9 o'clock Tacoma at Granite Point, exactly as recorded by the now deceased witness Richard Halverson. The investigator spoke slowly, each timestamp projected on the electronic board, leaving Nathan no room to deny. You and Sabrina were together at every single one of these points. Every timestamp is corroborated by forensics, witnesses, cameras, or statements. Nathan's expression began to change. Though he said nothing, his fists clenched, and his leg twitched slightly, classic signs of someone being pushed to the limit of denial. The investigator continued, the Toyota Tacoma passenger seat recovered from Pavel's garage had Emma's DNA spread across the surface. Not accidental, not from moving house, not because Emma left on her own. The DNA pattern is consistent only with the victim being forced into the seat or placed there while unconscious. Nathan closed his eyes for several seconds and took a deep breath, but the initial angry outbursts were gone. When the investigator displayed photos of the decomposed trash bag recovered from the culvert, along with Sabrina's fingerprints on the bag's opening, Nathan jumped from his chair and shouted, "What did Sabrina tell you? She's making it up to save herself." The investigator responded instantly, "Sabrina didn't talk about you. She talked about herself, and her fingerprints on the bag confirm it. But more importantly, if Sabrina was only helping dispose of evidence afterward, then who put Emma in the truck? Who drove the Tacoma? Who caused the passenger seat to be covered in Emma's DNA?" Nathan fell silent. For the first time, his silence was not tactical, it was confusion. The investigator pressed harder. Sabrina was in the passenger seat, so where did Emma's DNA come from? If Sabrina was in the passenger seat, who was driving, and who was in the back seat? The only person present for the entire timeline, from 7 a.m. until that evening, is you. Nathan opened his eyes and stared at the ceiling as if searching for an escape from reality. But the investigators gave him no room to hide in silence. They placed in front of him the map recovered from the hidden wall compartment. The map circling locations Emma had been and suspected sites like Paradise Ridge, US 95, and Granite Point. Investigator. Found in your house. It matches the forensic timeline perfectly. It can't be coincidence. Nathan shook his head, his voice weakening. I don't remember that. Someone put it there. The investigator ignored the claim and produced another document, the handwritten timeline from the same box, listing times that matched Nathan's 2003 statement, but with corrections in different inks. You were preparing an alibi. We know. Nathan dropped his head, grabbed his hair with both hands, and after a few seconds whispered, "It's not what you think." The investigator leaned in, "Then tell us what it is, because every piece of evidence points to you." Silence stretched for nearly a minute. Nathan breathed heavily, his voice trembling. Sabrina doesn't know everything. She only helped afterward. For the first time in 17 years, Nathan admitted that something happened before Sabrina became involved. Something forensics had already indicated, but that Nathan had now indirectly confirmed. The investigator seized the opening. We know Sabrina only got involved starting at US 95. What we need to know is what happened between 7:05 and 7:20. Nathan stared at the table, hands clasped tightly, his whole body rigid. The solidity of his denial was visibly crumbling. The investigators knew they had breached Nathan Olmstead's first line of defense, and that the truth, or at least Nathan's version of it, was closer than at any point since 2003. The silence that followed Nathan's statement, "Sabrina doesn't know everything," hung thick in the interview room, and the investigators understood this was the moment to tighten the forensic noose even further and force him across the final threshold between denial and confession. The investigator placed before Nathan a map of the Granite Point, Snake River area, where the late witness Richard Halverson had seen the Tacoma stop the morning Emma vanished, where the forensic timeline placed the truck from 8:20 to 9 a.m., and where Sabrina admitted Nathan dragged something heavy from the truck bed. When the satellite image of the location appeared on screen, Nathan looked away, but his eyes flickered noticeably, as if holding out just a few more minutes would exceed his endurance. The investigator lowered his voice, but spoke with ice-cold precision. "You said Sabrina doesn't know everything, so which part doesn't she know? Granite Point, or something before that?" Nathan's knuckles went white as he gripped his hands together, his jaw clenched. After a long moment he said, almost exhaling the words, "I left her at Snake River." The investigator asked him to repeat it clearly. This time Nathan looked up, eyes red, voice thin and drained. "The body is at Granite Point, in the northern rock crevice. I pushed her down." One investigator wrote down every word. Another asked Nathan to describe the exact location. Nathan continued, voice breaking. "The crevice that slopes steeply down to the river, about a 2 or 3 minute walk along the old trail from the parking area, where there's a leaning juniper, that's where I pushed her down." The investigator asked why there. Nathan answered immediately. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I didn't mean to kill her. It was an accident." The investigator stared straight into Nathan's eyes, making no effort to soften the response. "Forensics shows nothing consistent with an accident. Bodily fluid DNA on the passenger seat, evidence dumped in a culvert, trash bag with her handkerchief and personal items. Seat replaced that night. None of those details fit an accident." Nathan hung his head, pressing both hands to his forehead, voice growing quieter. "I don't know, I just wanted to clean everything up, so no one would think I did it on purpose." The investigator asked him to describe Emma's condition when they reached Granite Point. Nathan was silent for a long time, then said, "She wasn't moving. I thought she was already dead." Every investigator in the room understood. This was the first time Nathan had confirmed Emma's body might still be at Granite Point, one of the most inaccessible locations along the Snake River, with sheer rock crevices, deep water, strong currents, and jagged rocks that made searching with 2003 technology nearly impossible. When asked to pinpoint exactly where he took the body down, Nathan pointed to the northern area of Granite Point on the map, where a low cliff leads to a deep slot opening onto the river. "Here, where there's a small alcove, the current is a little stronger. I thought the body would be swept away, but I'm not sure." The investigator asked, "How did you get the body down?" Nathan shuddered, but answered, "I carried her from the truck bed. Sabrina didn't see. She stayed in the cab. I told her not to get out." This matched Sabrina's statement that she didn't want to look, and didn't know what Nathan was doing behind the truck. When asked why he didn't report an accident, if it truly was one, Nathan let out a short, choked laugh and said, "No one would have believed me. No one. The breakup, the arguments, everyone already thought I was scared." The investigator made no comment, only asked Nathan to continue. "Where exactly did the body fall? Did you see it float away?" Nathan shook his head. "I didn't look long. I left right away. I never went back." After the statement was fully recorded, Idaho State Police immediately notified the Idaho Search and Rescue Unit to prepare a large-scale body recovery operation. A terrain survey team was dispatched to Granite Point that same afternoon, while technicians compiled the necessary equipment list: ground-penetrating sonar, rock-penetrating radar, underwater drones, specialized boats, and cameras designed for murky water. 17 years earlier, this equipment had not been available. Now it represented the tools that could, for the first time, bring the truth about Emma Carlyle into the light. When Nathan's statement was officially documented and signed, the investigator closed the file, looked at him for a long moment, and said, "We're going there. And when we find her, the rest of your story will be verified." Nathan did not reply. He simply sat motionless, shoulders slumped, as if every ounce of strength had been drained from him, and as if he knew that the moment he revealed the location of Emma's body, the case had entered a phase from which there was no turning back. Just a few hours after Nathan Olmstead disclosed the location where he had hidden the body, Idaho Search and Rescue, together with the ISP forensic team, were deployed to Granite Point, a rugged granite gorge on the north side, where the Snake River cuts into the mountainside, forming a deep, hard-to-access crevice, exactly as Nathan had described in the interrogation room. The terrain there is treacherous, sheer granite walls, slick moss clinging to the edges, and the river slamming forcefully into rock pockets, making any search operation require extreme caution. The rescue team had to use safety ropes, rock anchors, and a pulley system to lower members one by one down the cliff face, approximately 45 feet below the roadway. A drone, equipped with an optical camera, was sent down first to survey and illuminate the entire ravine floor. LED lights swept across the rough stone, pooled water, and patches of rotten wood until they stopped on an anomaly. A structure resembling human bones protruding from beneath a thin layer of decayed leaves and sediment. The drone rotated, zoomed in, and the shape of a jawbone and long bones became clear, consistent with a body that had been dragged or had fallen from above. Immediately, the SAR team lowered 2 forensic technicians to the contact point using harnesses. They approached the spot marked by the drone and used soft brushes and dissecting tools to remove the sediment layer. Beneath the decayed leaves, part of a skull emerged, the forehead and cheekbones largely intact, while the back of the skull was shattered, likely from impact during the fall. After confirming it was a human body, the forensic team established a crime scene perimeter and used netting to prevent evidence from washing into the river. As they expanded the area, they recovered arm bones, femurs, ribs, and numerous smaller fragments, all scattered within a roughly 6-foot radius, consistent with the decomposition pattern of a body exposed for many years in a cold, damp environment. Items found near the remains further confirmed this was Emma Carlyle. A worn silver ring matching the description in the 2003 missing person file, a pale blue button matching fabric recovered from the trash bag in the US 95 culvert, and a broken hair clip with faded black plastic of the type Emma routinely wore. Most significantly, a larger piece of fabric, showing thread loops and heavy fading, was found snagged on a nearby rock outcrop, likely the remnant of the top Emma wore the morning she dropped her children at school. All evidence was collected with sterile tools, packaged and labeled according to forensic protocol. The remains were lifted in a specialized body transport bag, a process that took nearly an hour to haul up the dangerous rocky slope. Once on the surface, the bag was immediately transferred to the Idaho State Police Forensic Laboratory in Meridian. In the lab, identification proceeded along 2 tracks: dental records and DNA. Emma's dental records from 1999, re-provided by the family, included X-rays showing distinctive features, 2 composite fillings on left molars, and a small amalgam filling on an incisor. When compared to the recovered teeth, the location and size of the fillings matched perfectly, providing strong presumptive identification that the remains were Emma Carlyle. For official confirmation, mitochondrial DNA from an intact tibia was compared to the maternal reference sample Emma's mother had provided in 2003. Results returned after 14 hours of analysis showed a perfect match with no deviations in the haplogroup. Identity was confirmed by both methods. Once identification was complete, pathologists turned to cause and manner of death. Although the body was heavily decomposed after 17 years, the skull showed notable trauma, a fracture running from the temporal region down to the occipital bone that showed no signs of being a natural post-mortem or environmental crack. The pathologist concluded this was blunt force trauma from a heavy object or from the head being slammed against a hard surface before the drop into the gorge. Additionally, left ribs 4 and 5 showed perimortem fractures, not from the fall or later decomposition. These injuries completely contradicted Nathan's accident claim. The final report stated clearly, manner of death, homicide, cause of death, blunt force trauma. There was no evidence of drowning, meaning Emma was already dead before her body entered the river. This finding officially converted the 2003 missing person case of Emma Carlyle into a homicide investigation under Idaho law, solidifying the entire prosecutorial file and moving the case into the prosecution phase with the strongest evidence since the disappearance. The trial of Nathan Olmstead and Sabrina Mendoza began in early fall 2021 at the Leta County District Court, drawing intense media attention, the Carlyle family, and the Moscow, Idaho community. After nearly 18 years of waiting for answers to the heartbreaking disappearance. On the very first day, the prosecution presented an indictment described as tightly linked and unbreakable, beginning with key forensic evidence, Emma Carlyle's DNA on the passenger seat of the Tacoma. Nathan borrowed on the morning of September 25, 2003, a seat that had been removed and hidden in Pavel Gunnison's garage, recovered and analyzed in 2020, bearing bodily fluids and contact patterns, indicating Emma had been placed in the seat while incapacitated. Next, the rotted trash bag recovered from the US 95 culvert, containing Emma's embroidered handkerchief, fabric scraps, and hair clip, along with Sabrina Mendoza's fingerprint on the bag's opening. Placement only possible when tying or untying the bag, establishing Sabrina's role in evidence disposal. Then the 2003 ATM video, enhanced with forensic AI, now clearly showing Pavel's Tacoma passing the camera at 7:10 a.m. with 2 occupants in the cab, directly contradicting Nathan's claim he was alone, and matching Sabrina's later admission she rode shotgun that morning. Next, the alibi script, Nathan's handwritten timeline, hidden inside a cardboard box, found behind garage drywall during 2020 renovations, listing times that matched his original statement, but with multiple scratched-out corrections, proving an attempt to manufacture an alibi. Followed by evidence recovered at Granite Point on the Snake River, the exact location Nathan identified. Emma's skeletal remains, silver ring, clothing fabric, broken hair clip, and bones showing pre-mortem skull fractures, forensically ruled death by blunt force trauma, manner of death, homicide. Additionally, the prosecution presented Sabrina's 4th interview, in which she admitted riding with Nathan in the Tacoma, holding the trash bag shut, while Nathan discarded it on US 95, and witnessing Nathan drag something heavy from the truck bed at Granite Point, the moment he disposed of Emma's body, and finally, Nathan's confession in the interrogation room, where he admitted leaving her at the Snake River and pushing her down, though still calling it an accident. A claim the medical examiner proved false based on skull and rib injuries, showing violence before the fall. In opening statements, the prosecution asserted the case was built not just on confessions, but on an interlocking chain of physical, forensic, video, trace, and admissions evidence that eliminated any possibility of coincidence. They argued Nathan's actions, placing Emma in the Tacoma, driving the US 95 and Granite Point routes, disposing of evidence, swapping the seat to remove DNA, hiding maps and the timeline, were not the behavior of someone in an accident, but clear signs of intentional concealment of a crime. For Sabrina, the state argued she was a critical after-the-fact accessory, helping dispose of evidence, lying repeatedly for 17 years, and only admitting the truth when confronted with undeniable forensics. Nathan's defense opened by claiming forensics could not prove the moment of death, and that Nathan was under psychological duress during interrogation, leading to an incomplete confession. They suggested Emma could have died from a fall, and Nathan panicked and mishandled the aftermath, attempting to reduce the charge to involuntary manslaughter. The prosecution immediately countered with the skull fracture analysis, showing the injury occurred before the body fell, ruling out accident entirely. Sabrina's attorney argued she was manipulated by Nathan and didn't know what was in the bag, but the state highlighted massive inconsistencies in her 2003, 2008, and 2020 statements, plus her fingerprint in the exact spot used to tie the bag, proving active participation. Subsequent trial days focused on expert forensic testimony. Specialists explained how touch DNA confirmed Emma's hair in the Tacoma, how MET DNA from the tibia matched the 2003 reference, how AI-enhanced ATM video identified the license plate and 2 silhouettes, and how every item from the US 95 bag matched what Emma carried that day. The jury paid close attention because the evidence was scientific, not narrative. When defense counsel challenged the reliability of AI forensic enhancement, the expert responded that the license plate was confirmed via cross-frame synthesis, and the presence of two occupants was independently agreed upon by three separate experts, significantly weakening the defense attack. In closing arguments, the prosecutor stood before the jury and said, "We have DNA, physical items, video, witnesses, a timeline, and confessions. Each layer is strong on its own, but together they paint an undeniable picture. Nathan Olmstead abducted, assaulted, and murdered Emma Carlyle. Sabrina Mendoza helped him cover it up. Justice waited 18 years, but the truth did not. After 2 days of deliberation, the jury returned unanimous verdicts. For Nathan Olmstead, guilty of first-degree kidnapping, guilty of felony obstruction of justice, guilty of evidence tampering, and guilty of second-degree murder based on the forensic findings. For Sabrina Mendoza, guilty of conspiracy, guilty of felony tampering, and guilty of false statements. When the judge read the sentences, the courtroom fell silent. Nathan Olmstead, 50 years without parole, to serve his full natural life in the Idaho State prison system. Sabrina Mendoza, 20 years, eligible for parole review after 17 years if rehabilitation requirements are met. As the sentences were pronounced, the Carlyle family held each other tightly, many in tears, while the prosecution stood in solemn silence. After 18 years of deadlock, forensic evidence, and final confessions had brought the Emma Carlyle case to a clear legal conclusion, closing one of the longest and most complex cold cases in Latah County history. After the sentences for Nathan Olmstead and Sabrina Mendoza were handed down, Emma Carlyle's remains, positively identified by dental records and DNA, were released from the Idaho State Police lab to her family, ending a painful 17-year odyssey for her parents and 3 children who had lived without answers. On the day they received her, the family held a small service at First Presbyterian Church in Moscow, the same church where Emma used to take her kids every Sunday morning. Friends, her children's former classmates, and old neighbors placed white flowers around the closed casket in a belated but complete farewell. Emma's ashes were later interred in a small garden behind her mother's home in Boise, among the lavender beds she had always loved. With the remains returned, the cold case unit completed the final steps of a nearly 2-decade investigation. The entire file was reviewed one last time, from the original 2003 reports, Paradise Ridge search logs, and ATM footage, to the 2020-21 forensic breakthroughs, DNA on the Tacoma seat, the US 95 trash bag, the hidden alibi script, the reprocessed video, Granite Point evidence, and final interrogations. The case was officially marked, solved, offender convicted, closed per regulation, and the internal investigative summary was forwarded to ISP training academies as instructional material. The fact that a seemingly unsolvable case was cracked after 17 years became a widespread topic of discussion in Moscow, where many still vividly remembered Emma's explorer, found abandoned on Paradise Ridge, never imagines the real ending lay deep inside the Granite Point Gorge on the Snake River. At Russell Elementary, where Emma dropped off her child for the last time, a small memorial plaque was placed near the playground, bearing only the words, "In memory of Emma Carlyle, may truth find its way." In the community, people reflected that the case forced them to look back at the early 2000s, when surveillance cameras were primitive, forensic science limited, and many leads simply could not be pursued with today's tools. Idaho State Police held a closing press conference emphasizing that solving this cold case was not the result of a single piece of evidence, but the convergence of preservation of evidence. In 2003, the unexpected discovery of the box hidden in the wall, modern forensic capabilities, touch DNA, mtDNA, AI video enhancement, and the relentless persistence of the cold case unit in connecting every tiny fragment. ISP called it an exemplary file, demonstrating the value of never discarding any evidence, no matter how insignificant it may seem. The case's impact extended beyond Moscow. Police agencies across the Pelosi region and neighboring states like Washington and Oregon studied ISP's reinvestigation protocol for application to their own backlog of cold cases. Forensic experts nationwide cited the Emma Carlyle case as a textbook example of how combining new technology with properly preserved old evidence can unlock cases long considered permanently closed. Socially, it took the Moscow community weeks to process their emotions, from grief over Emma's tragic truth, to anger at how Nathan and Sabrina concealed the crime, to relief that justice had finally been served. Many parents said they felt some measure of safety restored, though the horror that a kind, ordinary mother suffered such violence in their quiet town could never fully fade. When the case closed, the longtime ISP investigator, who had carried the file since 2003, wrote in his final report, "The greatest lesson is not what technology can do, but that we must be patient with the truth. The truth does not disappear. It simply waits in the place we have not yet reached." After keeping Emma Carlyle's file on the active cold case shelf for 17 years, the cold case unit officially closed the nearly 300-page dossier, stamped in red ink, closed. In the quiet of the records room, the Emma Carlyle case finally found its ending, late but right, complete, and enough for her family and the Moscow community to move forward after nearly 2 decades left suspended in an unfinished story. The story of the Emma Carlyle case, from a peaceful morning in Moscow, Idaho in 2003 to the moment her remains were recovered, 17 years later, at Granite Point, mirrors many very real issues in American life today: the fragility of community safety, the danger of intimate partner violence, the critical importance of forensic technology, and the value of persistence in investigation and community support for justice. One of the deepest lessons is how Emma vanished in just minutes, on what seemed like an ordinary morning. Paying attention to small behavioral changes, Emma not showing up to pick up her kids, her phone going unanswered, allowed the family to report her missing quickly, a crucial step in any disappearance. In today's United States, where intimate violence remains a major problem, the story is a reminder never to ignore warning signs, no matter how small. The forensic evidence, Emma's hair in the Tacoma, the US 95 trash bag, the AI-enhanced ATM video, shows how modern technology can completely change the outcome of a case. But technology is only useful when evidence is properly preserved, and investigators never give up. Details like the Tacoma seat stored in a garage, or the library card found in the hidden box, prove that sometimes the most seemingly meaningless objects break an entire case wide open. Finally, the story forces us to confront the reality that many crimes occur within close relationships where victims are least believed. Nathan's fabricated alibi script, Sabrina's 17 years of lies, and the community's early assumption that Emma had simply walked away all reflect that American society still needs greater sensitivity to signs of violence and manipulation. The lesson: protecting families and communities depends not only on laws or technology, but on vigilance, persistence, and an unwillingness to give up, values that ultimately allowed Emma's family to learn the truth after 17 years of waiting. Thank you for following the 17-year journey to solve the Emma Carlyle case. If this story touched you, please subscribe to the channel so we can continue exploring other unfinished cases together. See you in the next video, where the truth of each case opens a new lesson for all of us.